Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. I'm your host, Adrienne Lawrence, and I have an incredible guest for you. Executive Director of the Western State Center and Senior Fellow with the Southern Poverty Law Center, Eric Ward. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
Adrienne, it's great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, oh man, and we were just kind of talking before the show has kicked off about how wild things are right now coming out of 4 years of absolute chaos and destruction. How's it going for you?
It has indeed been 100 days almost since the insurrection on January 6th. And it has been a hard time for our organization, for communities. You know, many of us are a little bit on a sugar high. Right, we mobilized across this country to stand up for democracy. We were able to block this drive towards authoritarianism, and we're feeling that joy. But the truth is those who are involved in the insurrection, those who gave support to it, those folks are still very much around, still very much busy at dismantling democracy, blocking civil rights. And attempting to intimidate folks through political violence. We have a long way to go, but certainly we should understand that we are at a better position because of the hard work that's been done.
Yes, absolutely. There has been a lot of hard work put in by people who are actually committed to democracy, and we're very grateful to them. But as you mentioned, hey, we have a full kind of a faction of people out there who are trying to dismantle this, and they also to some extent have been brainwashed. And I know that Sunday, April 11th, there's going to be a White Lives Matter group that's reportedly planning a protest at Ohio State House. And I was hoping you could tell me, why is this newsworthy?
Yeah, it's newsworthy because of the phrasing, this idea White Lives Matters. And we should understand White Lives Matters is probably less an organization and more an organizing tactic. It is seeking to try to generate publicity. And it's not altogether different, the call of White Lives Matters, right, than the call of reverse racism in the 1980s, right, or in the 90s, this idea of white student unions. It's an attempt to kind of shock the conversation, the real conversations that are happening around race in the society, right? In policing, in economy. And they are basically trying to hijack that conversation by drawing this false equivalency. In the same way, if you can't say Black Lives Matters, why can't you say White Lives Matters? It's an attempt to shift the narrative. We should understand there is no one in this country out there saying white lives don't matter. In fact, I learn White Lives Matters every time I walk out the door, every time I try to conduct business, engage health in this country. No one is arguing that White Lives Matters. This is an attempt to usurp the conversation and a momentum towards equity, opportunity, and prosperity in this country. It's an attempt to try to build political violence, but it is propaganda, and it remains to be seen if they're able to really mobilize around this event. In truth, the white nationalist movement and the alt-right is reeling from arrests that have happened, from job losses, and the understanding that the majority of Americans believe in inclusion. And the White Lives Matters is an attempt to delude us or deceive us into believing that this country is on the march towards exclusion, but it's not. We're just watching people throw tantrums.
And they are very, unfortunately, violent tantrums, as we saw on January 6th, as well as when we've seen instances of largely groups of white people necessarily coming together and this feeling of victimhood, or that some rights are being taken away from white people and whatnot. And so it does bring a lot of fear in the minds of others, including people who are also white and more toward the inclusion and understand where Black Lives Matter comes from. So kind of, I guess, should people be on edge when it comes to events like this?
We have to take it seriously. We have to understand that there is a social movement that is not grounded in inclusion, it's in exclusion. And it seeks to create a white-only ethno-state, and it seeks to achieve that by rolling back the gains of civil rights that have occurred over the last 75 years. They have shown and been clear that they are willing to use physical violence to achieve that means. We absolutely have to take it seriously, but we have to understand that they do not define the agenda of America. What they do is attempt to distract us from the work that's ahead. So let's take it seriously, but let's understand the best way that we challenge the white nationalist movement is by making real the promise of equity, opportunity, and prosperity in America.
And it does seem that a lot of people don't seem to understand that equity doesn't necessarily mean that they will lose out, that this is not a zero-sum game. But it seems that a lot of people don't necessarily understand that. And we saw a lot of that indoctrination go on over the last 4 years. And now we are living with the consequences of that. So now that you've seen this new administration coming in, given your position as executive director of the Western State Center, also being a senior fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center, what change do you think needs to be implemented to truly make change from essentially what pieces we're left with post-Trump administration?
Yes, the administration has to move very quickly to secure voting rights in this country. We cannot allow states who are attempting to usurp the democratic practice from engaging in this type of violence, or engaging in violence or engaging in political distraction to deny the vote to individuals. So we have to defend the vote. That's the first piece. The second is we have to understand that there are real needs that Americans are facing in this country, whether we're talking about health, housing, and employment, and we need to meet those needs. We have to understand that the answer and the solution to the white nationalist movement is not a status quo of inequality. We really have to meet the needs of all Americans so that we can move forward together. The third is this, though. We have to pay attention to the criminal activity of white nationalists and those who seek to undercut democratic small d practice in this country. We have to make sure that law enforcement is not drawing false distinctions between human rights activists and white nationalists engaged in political violence in this country. And we have to make sure that law enforcement is inoculated from attempts by the white nationalist movement to recruit. Those are the real issues that are ahead of us in this moment. And we have to do it at a time where we're also contending with a global pandemic. We have real work to do. We have to roll up our sleeves. We have to manage this white nationalist movement, but we can't allow them to drive the American agenda right now.
Absolutely. That is so incredibly important because we are at a very kind of sensitive, vulnerable, delicate stage coming out of the Trump administration, in addition to dealing with this global pandemic and trying to get people vaccinated and whatnot. Also with this kind of political civil rights backdrop of having the Derek Chauvin trial. And we just saw New Mexico last week go ahead and remove any kind of qualified immunity. And so there seems to be a big change for law enforcement and the way in which the American society treats and interacts with them. So how do you think that that will impact our future moving forward? Do you think this is something we're going to continue to move toward in terms of dismantling these protections for law enforcement to essentially elevate civil rights?
Yeah, communities around the country are demanding community safety, and that means a reformed law enforcement in this country. And we are seeing this. We saw this before the recent election in places like Camden. We're watching it in Minnesota. We're watching it in Portland, Oregon, where communities are building solutions around the type of community safety programs that they desire and need. We need law enforcement to join us in that, not resist. What we are looking for, all of us, are safe communities, healthy communities, and it's going to take all of us. That doesn't mean, though, and it doesn't exist with a 20th century law enforcement strategy. It's about 21st century community safety and policing in this moment.
Yes, bringing us all together, because the police are individuals, they are citizens, they are part of you and me and our environment, and we all have to work together. And so thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all of your insight and knowledge. And can you tell people where they can find more about you and the Western State Center?
Yes. So people can find more about Western State Center and our fight for the 21st century civil rights movement by visiting us at westernstatecenter.org. And we look forward to seeing them there.
Thanks so much again.
Thank you so much.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cohen. Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries. Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Half Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
let's
flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word.
Okay.
This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually gonna show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Froze and crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Welcome back into the conversation. It's Adrienne Lawrence, and this time I am joined by Democratic strategist and attorney and managing partner of the Chavis Law Group, Kevin Chavis. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so Kevin, on Friday, we concluded day 10 of the Derek Chauvin trial, and one of the most anticipated witnesses testified. That's Dr. Andrew Baker of the Hennepin County Medical Examiner. He's the one who performed that initial autopsy of George Floyd. What stuck out to you about Dr. Baker's testimony?
Well, I thought he clarified what he meant in his, in his death certificate when he stated the cause of death, the pulmonary arrest, related to the restraint and the subdual and everything. He said that it meant in the pertaining to or in the matter of, I think was the language. So he basically was saying that the arrest did occur, in not so many words, because of the knee on the neck. So I think that was good for the state, that he seemed to tie the cardiac event to the knee being on the neck. That was important. I think that was the point they were trying to get from him. So I thought he was good for the state when he clarified that and made more of a link between the knee being on the neck, that restraint and the compression, to the heart attack that followed shortly thereafter.
Yes, that very much seemed to be very important testimony, because if he's saying essentially in his report that it was cardiac arrest, then it gives the defense more leeway to say that it was not the restraint on the neck. But if the restraint on the neck is what produced the cardiac arrest, that is so important. And so, as you noted, that's extremely impactful for that testimony there. And we also know that the jurors happen to hear from a Dr. Lindsay Thomas. She's a forensic pathologist. She also helped train Dr. Baker. And Dr. Thomas seemed to say that she believed that George Floyd died from a lack of oxygen that was caused by Chauvin kneeling on the neck. She seemed to be very direct in this regard. How would you interpret her testimony in terms of the impact that it had for the parties involved?
Yes, you're right. She was much more direct, and I thought she was probably their best witness of the day, maybe even of the last couple of days. The police chief, I thought, was very impactful too. But her testimony was great. Like you said, she trained the current county examiner. She also had over 30 years of experience, over 3,000 or something autopsies that she's done. I mean, her resume is incredible. And she spoke without any real hesitation. She talked about her experience dealing with people who had overdoses from methamphetamine or fentanyl. And she said that this was not that. What I saw in that video was not an overdose. She said that with conviction. I thought that was a great moment for the state. And the defense in previous days had been criticizing some of the other medical experts because they weren't forensic pathologists. The defense attorney was quick to point that out. Well, she's like the ultimate forensic pathologist. They couldn't use that with her, and she was very direct. I thought she was a great witness for the state. I think they would be very happy with her testimony.
Oh yes, I absolutely agree with that. She seemed very cool, calm, collected, neutral. Yeah. Also, the way in which she spoke about the death and how the bodies work. You can tell that woman has seen a body or two, and she is a clinician. She handled her testimony almost in a very surgical way, and it seemed to be very beneficial for the prosecution in that case. And it seemed that she had suggested, or at least practically just said, that Floyd would not have died but for the actions of Officer Chauvin. So also too, to kind of transition away from that to go to more of the defense's side, they had observed that there was a toxicology report that found that there were methamphetamines and fentanyl in George Floyd's system. Plus, there were pill fragments found at the scene, even though Dr. Baker said she did not find any pill fragments in his stomach. How do you think that impacted the jury?
Well, look, the defense, all they're trying to do is just get one juror to say there's enough reasonable doubt here that we don't feel we can convict off, the defendant, Derek Chauvin. So they're doing what's expected. They're trying as much as possible to make this about any drug problem that Floyd may have had, anything he had in his system. So I don't think that, I thought it was damaging that they found he didn't have the pill fragments in his system at the time. That wasn't good. Previously, I think when they had George Floyd's former girlfriend on the stand and she admitted to him overdosing at one point, I thought that was one of their highlights when it comes to talking about his past drug problem and experiences with potential overdoses. That was a good moment for them. I don't think they have quite reached that level since. We'll see moving forward, but it's hard to say exactly how a jury will react. But I know that was sort of par for the course with the way the defense is expected to attack that issue, in the trial.
Yes, it definitely seemed like the defense was going for that kind of implication that it was drugs and it was not the officer's knee on this man's neck for several minutes, which, hey, as you have kind of keenly observed, the fact that there might be one juror out there who's willing to kind of just embrace that and go with it. But I guess we will see how that all turns out. So we're going to have to expect coming up at some point in time that the defense will call its case and its witnesses. Who do you think would potentially be strongest for the defense?
Well, they're probably going to try to call some law enforcement individuals who will speak to training, where that will sort of say that, hey, these type of neck constraints or neck compressions are used and are valid things to employ when dealing with a defendant or an arrestee who may be a little bit frantic, a little bit out of control. They'll probably show some of the same video where George Floyd was saying, hey, I can't breathe, or I'm claustrophobic and was struggling to get on the ground. So they'll probably do some of what the state did in calling even people from outside of Minnesota to come in and say, hey, our department does authorize that or has trained officers to use similar tactics. And I think that a big thing though for the defense, this case is so unique because of the mountains of video evidence we have, and it's so striking, the video. So there's not much that the defense can do in the face of those videos. In week one, it was very emotional. It was very powerful hearing those witnesses testify, and taking us back to that day and painting the picture for what it was like. So I think the defense will probably call way less witnesses for sure. And they'll try to, also call some medical experts of their own to testify that, hey, his heart condition probably was a result of years of drug abuse, and those to say those things more clearly. Again, it remains to be seen how that will play and what the prosecution will do on cross. But I certainly anticipate the defense's witness list to be much smaller, and it won't take as much time to get through their witnesses, I would anticipate.
Absolutely. And do you actually think Chauvin will testify?
That is a good question. He may, but I don't think so. But it's hard to say. One thing that I think will be interesting is that in Minnesota they have the spark of life doctrine. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it allows for parties to call witnesses who can try to humanize the victim, which is usually not really allowed until sentencing. But in Minnesota, they had a 1985 case that allows individuals to be called simply just to talk about, hey, this guy, was a person, talk about memories they had with them as a child and everything. But they'll have to be careful because they're not supposed to get into character witness or character evidence. So they shouldn't say, oh, George Floyd, he was such a gentle guy, or he was a big guy, but he was a gentle giant. And it's sometimes difficult for witnesses to stay sort of disciplined. And if they do cross the line, that will open the door for the defense to bring in negative character evidence. So I'm looking forward to that because this is only allowed really in Minnesota. I'm looking forward to see what the state does next week, probably at the end of next week. I think they're going to call maybe his sibling and one of his friends. Hopefully those two witnesses, if you're the state, stick to the script, don't go too far, because they don't want to open the door for more evidence about, past drug use or any violent tendencies, anything like that. That would not be good for the state. So I think that's something definitely to keep an eye on as we move forward.
Absolutely. And as we kind of, as a nation, start to grapple more and understand more drug use and to humanize individuals involved in drug use and understand that drug use doesn't necessarily equate to criminality or violence necessarily. I think that that's an important lesson, that we have these conversations and continue to learn from them. And we only have about a minute left, but I would love to hear your thoughts in terms of how do you think this is all going to shake out based on what you've seen so far?
Well, in all honesty, to me, the video evidence is so clear and so damning that I don't see how Chauvin couldn't at least be found guilty for the negligent homicide, for count 3. Even if you say he didn't intend to kill him or, didn't do anything reckless or wanton, it at least was beyond what a reasonable person would expect someone to do in that situation, especially once his pulse stopped and, and all those things. But again, that one juror, if the defense can find one juror that is buying their story and that is more concerned with the drug use or whatever it is, we could see a result that most of us will not like. We've seen it before, but I think that he will be convicted at least of the negligent manslaughter. I think the expert witnesses and the forensic witnesses were very, very compelling. I think this week was great for the prosecution.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kevin. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Ugranic is sparing with you guys on a lovely Monday evening. Now, we're in good moods. The problem is, of course, the news is disastrous. The news is disastrous on a lot of fronts. I'm keeping it real with you guys. We have cultural issues. We have police brutality issues. We have progressives caving in Congress issues. We have Republican issues. And we're gonna cover them all. That's what we do, because our job is to cover the news. I will give you a fair but optimistic view on all these things. And where optimism is not warranted, we'll tell you. So tons and tons of news to get to. I'm sure Casper had a good weekend. I'm sure I did. I'm sure you did. So we're gonna move forward and do the news.
All right. I just want to note for myself, I am not in a good mood. And it is because of the rundown. It is because of the stories that we're talking about today. And I'm glad that you still find optimism, even after we talk about two different cases of police using brutality and excessive force. Let's start off with Virginia. One of two Virginia cops who pulled guns on and assaulted an Army officer has been fired. The situation stems from a traffic stop involving an Army officer by the name of Karen Nazario, who is both Latino and Black. Nazario was driving on a dark road in rural Virginia when the police tried to pull him over for allegedly a missing license plate. The car actually had a temporary license plate since it was a new car. Anyway, at that point, Windsor, Virginia police officer Joe Gutierrez tried to pull him over. And unfortunately, the situation became very violent from that moment on. So I wanna show you the video of what occurred, and then I'll give you more details about the aftermath.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I ask you what's going on?
Get out now.
I have not committed any crimes.
You're being stopped for a traffic violation. You're not cooperating at this point right now. You're under arrest for, you're being detained, okay? You're being detained for
a traffic violation. I do not have to get out the vehicle. You haven't even told me why I'm being stopped.
About 2 to 3 minutes in, Officer Crocker tried to open the driver's door. In his report, he wrote, quote, "When I attempted to unlock and open the driver's door, the driver assaulted myself by striking my hand away and pulled away from Officer Gutierrez's grip." But in his own body camera footage, Nazario is not seen striking anyone. Crocker's report also says that at this point, Gutierrez, quote, "gave several more commands to comply with orders or he would be sprayed with his OC spray. But no such warnings could be heard. Gutierrez just sprayed Nazario, still without either officer having told Nazario what exactly he was pulled over for.
That's f***ed up. That's
the car now.
I don't even want to reach for my seatbelt. Can you
take your seatbelt off and get out of the car? You made this way more difficult than it had to be. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Can you please talk to me
on the ground now.
Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Why am I being treated like this? Why?
You're not cooperating. Get on the ground.
So already from that video, you can see where the police report differs significantly from what actually happened and what was caught on that footage that we showed you. I should also note that since the Army officer here, Nazario, was driving on a dark rural road, what he did when the cops tried to pull him over was put his blinker on, indicating that he intends to pull over, but he drove to a lit area for the officer's safety and for his own safety. And so that is gonna be discussed in this next clip, which also touches on what I'm sure many people are thinking about front and center, and that's the racial component to this story. Let's take a look.
Nazario explained why he didn't immediately pull over.
I was pulling over to a well-lit area for my safety and yours. I have respect for law enforcement.
But Gutierrez said that wasn't the problem.
If I don't have what the media is spewing with the race relations between minorities and law enforcement, I get it, okay? So like I told you, as far as you not stopping and because you weren't comfortable and you wanted a well-lit spot, Lieutenant, that happens all the time. It happens to me a lot. And it's I would say 80% of the time, not always, 80% of the time, it's a minority.
And while the officers couldn't understand why Nazario didn't get out of the car as instructed,
I want you to comply.
Nazario said he didn't know why he was being stopped.
I've never looked out the window and saw a gun blazing immediately.
Gutierrez eventually told Nazario that he had a conversation with the chief of police and was giving him the option to let this all go.
There's no need getting this on your record. I don't want it on your record. However, it's entirely up to you. If you want to and I don't mean that disrespectfully, okay? I mean, you have that right as a citizen. If that's what you want, we'll charge you. It doesn't change my life one way or the way.
After reviewing that footage, Windsor, Virginia police have decided to fire police officer Joe Gutierrez, and obviously for good reason. Everything that the Army officer alleged has been proven by that video, including the very clear threat regarding Nazario's military reputation and future. So there have already been some consequences. The other cop that was there seemed pretty terrified and didn't know what he was doing. I'm not saying that he's not going to face any consequences or shouldn't, but that's where we're at with the story right now. Cenk, what do you think?
So one of the worst parts of it was right in the beginning when they pull up to him, and for about a minute they keep yelling two contradictory commands. And watching the video, I had read the headline. I knew he hadn't been killed, but I was so worried that something worse was going to happen to him because they kept saying, "Put your hands out the window and get out of the car." Well, if your seatbelt is buckled, you can't have your hands outside the window and get out of the car. You just can't. And you saw that play out later in the video, and you guys saw some of that in the portions that we played, right? And so and I remember a story we covered where in that case it was a white guy in a hotel room, and the cops had him crawling around on the floor, and they kept giving him contradictory orders. And when he followed one but not the other because he couldn't do both at the same time, they shot him dead. Right, so that's why I was so worried for this guy at the beginning of the video. Luckily, in this case, they didn't shoot him. I mean, this is the lowest bar we have, right? And this is we're always like, oh my God, he didn't get murdered for no reason. Thank God. All right, now let's talk about the rest of the story, right? And then when you talk about that, so getting pulled over, he didn't have tags. It turns out he did have tags. It was temporary tags. It's super clear. So guys, think about it, okay? Just in every one of these stories, all I ask you to do is put yourself in each person's shoes, right? So if you're the driver of a car, it doesn't matter what race you are, right? If the cops pull up on you when you have an excellent sense that you didn't do anything wrong, and they pull guns immediately. I mean, I've been pulled over a lot of times. I never got a gun pulled on me. I'd be like, oh my God, what is going on? Why are they pulling guns on me? What's happening? And they're like, get out of the car and have your hands out. And it looks like, do they have me mistaken with someone else that's like a mortal danger to everyone in this neighborhood? I mean, what kind of an incredible murderer do they think I am to get this kind of treatment? And that was over because he had perfectly legitimate temporary tags and that you either saw or didn't see, and you wanted to pull him over because he was a black man in a nice looking car. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. And you saw the officer talk about minorities later, right? So you know, if it happened to a white right winger, they would be enraged. They would be enraged. How dare you treat me like this? I have my rights. When a white right winger says that, they feel perfectly emboldened to say it. When a African American person says it, no matter where they're from, in this case, a lieutenant in the army, they think, how dare you not get on the ground with your face on the pavement with a gun to your head for no reason at all? Comply, you must comply. If you don't comply, even within an inch, we have every right to execute you. Now, we're supposed to accept this. And guys, I'm tired of the bad apple nonsense. Totally, I'm exhausted. How many videos are like this? We've literally shown you hundreds of videos like this. It's not bad apples. We train cops to be vicious. We train cops to enforce their authority, and that is their #1 priority. It doesn't matter what the crime is. It matters to some degree who the person is and what race they are. Okay, but most importantly, if they do not comply with your orders, contradictory, logical, legal or not legal, it doesn't matter. Then you crush that citizen and you show them who's boss by either shooting them, tasering them, pounding their face in the pavement. Why are they arresting the guy in the first place? They didn't even ask him a single question. He's in the car, he's got his hands out, he's not a threat. Why don't you go ask him a question? Hey, how about your tags? Oh, right, there's your tags. Hey, are you a criminal? For no reason, I'm asking you because you're black. Ask him the question. I don't know. Ask him what you're going to ask him. No, and they're never going to do anything. Now the governor in Minnesota in a different story is talking about, oh, we have to do something. Oh, shut up. They are constantly with the politicians. Oh, we should do something, but not defund the police, not this, not that, not this, not this. Police union, give me the money, police union. Okay, I love you guys, etc. I almost said it. Anyway, so they're not gonna do anything. They're gonna pull over more black people. They're gonna kill more of them. They're gonna threaten more of them. But if you actually go to fix the problem, which is police training, and you say, hey, maybe the cops shouldn't go to maximum force every single time, they're gonna say, oh, you're endangering police lives. You're endangering police lives. Nothing but total BS. I'm sick of it. So it isn't bad apples. It is the whole culture of policing, because we train them to be brutal and vicious, and especially to poor people and especially to minorities.
I mean, I think it's a combination of so many different things. Yes, there's an issue with training. In this particular case, you have the police department saying that they're firing Gutierrez because he didn't follow protocol. For instance, he refused to tell Nazario what he was being pulled over for, what he was being arrested for. That was never answered. So that's point number one. Point number two is we've been dealing with story after story of unarmed individuals getting shot and killed by cops over and over and over again. And what tends to happen when there isn't a legitimate reform or response to that? Well, it emboldens cops, right? I mean, if you feel that you're invincible, if you feel that you have anger issues and you can carry them out on anyone you come across, and you don't have to deal with any consequences for literally shooting and killing an unarmed individual, well, then why would you fear carrying out an act of violence like that or excessive force once a situation arises? The other thing is, let's keep it real. We have a security state, a militarized police state that is a byproduct of our foreign policy as well. I mean, part of the reason why we see this militaristic activity or behavior by cops is because the giant inventory of weaponry that we have for our military continues to get made. We have a surplus and it gets shifted over to police departments. I mean, all of that creates this culture of violence that seems to be greenlit by, yes, the police union that protects the cops regardless of what they do, but also by right-wing media, by right-wing politicians, and the cycle goes on and on and on. And on the other side, do we have lawmakers who are willing to do something that's actually substantive in response to police violence? And the answer is no. Look, I'm gonna keep it real. People are gonna hate what I'm about to say. The mass protests that happened last summer were incredibly important, okay? I mean, largest protests in US history. But what did the protesters get in return from Democratic lawmakers on a local level? Oh, we're gonna do a Black Lives Matter mural in front of Trump Tower. So what? So what? What does that do to fundamentally change policing in this country? And the mass protests are important, but they need to be coupled with like some sort of mechanism to continue applying pressure to lawmakers, organized individuals who continue applying pressure, and we just have not seen that. And so what we get in response is more mass shootings, more mass shootings. I think it's too simplistic to say, oh, it's just the training. Oh yeah, one other massive thing I forgot to mention, white supremacists infiltrating local police departments across the country. That's a huge problem as well. I mean, there's so many different factors to look at. And really, there haven't been any substantive responses or reforms after we see all these examples.
No, look, let's be honest. Democrats have done nothing. What did Joe Biden do today? In the second story of police abuse in Minnesota, he went and yelled at the protesters. And because, oh, no, you don't want to seem like you're soft on protesters. And so I get it. There was looters in Minnesota, and then they shouldn't do that. Yeah. Well, since those protests, like Anna said, what have you done for them? Nothing. So then you say, oh, well, you shouldn't get frustrated. Well, okay, then why don't you do something? No, I'm not going to. Well, okay, then screw you. So I mean, we just covered a story last week in LA. Same thing. There's a police response. Turns out there's somebody did domestic violence. It turns out it's a white guy. They didn't hear, it didn't get conveyed to them as a white guy. They just pull over the first black guy. And same thing, they don't even ask him any questions. They handcuff him immediately, they rough him up immediately. He says, this is my house, why are you doing this to me? They're like, how dare you? I'm a cop, I'll do whatever the hell I want. I have ultimate authority. And that's why I talk about the training. I don't mean training like, oh, you put on the handcuffs wrong. No, I mean like their entire culture is wrong. They trained them to abuse the citizens. They trained them to use as much force as possible and to never take a risk with even getting a fingernail, hurt. And they train them that if anyone looks suspicious, black people, Latinos, etc., to go rough them up and handcuff them and arrest them and ask questions later. Now, at the end, Gutierrez realizes that it was a false arrest. And what does he do? He says, now I could continue to arrest you and that'll ruin your life, or you could not make any trouble here. Oh, okay, so you know what you did is wrong, and now you're threatening to ruin his life anyway after you already screwed him over. And let's be honest about accountability. There's no accountability. Gutierrez got fired today. You know why? Because the video got released. Before the video this happened back in December. Before the video got released, he wasn't fired. They would have kept him. They would have probably promoted him because cops are allowed to get away with anything. That's what I mean by culture and training. Any politician, and they're all mealy-mouthed, they never do anything, and they're not gonna do anything. Biden's not gonna pass a goddamn thing other than things that are performative, okay? They will all claim, oh yeah, we're working so hard on the Black Lives Matter, etc. But the culture, how dare you? We have to protect the police. I mean, they had to murder the people. Bad apples. Let's fire that guy. Let's fire that guy. Did you ever fire any of their trainers? Did you ever fire any of their bosses? Did you ever go in there and say, stop killing people because you thought, hey, it's a black person and I'm in danger, I'll just shoot him and be done with it. Or in this case, I'll pound him into the pavement just in case. No, they're never gonna change it. That's why people are sick of white supremacy and these overlords constantly bullying us and then forcing people that are protesting to apologize. Stop with the apologies. Demand some goddamn change, including from Democrats who never do anything.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we have one conservative responding to this by blaming the Army officer, Nazario. Come right back.
All right, back on the Young Turks. If you find a good cop, show me. Looking for one. Okay, and by the way, it's not that I don't agree with the people who say all bad people, like cops are inherently bad people. That's insane. They're human beings, okay? No, they get in there and we teach them to be terrible people, terrible people, and then they do what they're trained to do. Anyway, all right, let me read from you guys. Captain Lieutenant writes in on YouTube Super Chat, one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, only happens in a Jackson 5 lyric. In reality, one bad apple spoils the barrel. First of all, that's true. Second of all, it ain't one bad apple. They're all trained to be bad apples. No cop looks at any of these videos and thinks that any of them had done a single thing wrong. Every cop looks at every video and goes, nailed it. I don't know what the problem is. We're the victims. Okay, TYT Wolfpack Justice Dem says, police departments across the country purposely hire officers who score low on empathy. I read this on Cop Watch or similar before they were all taken down. It would make for a great story on TYT. I haven't read that, I'll look into it, but that's not surprising. If you have empathy for people, you might not smash their head into the ground for no goddamn reason or murder them. British 32 writes in, hi TYT, enjoying your show every day of the week from the UK. When are laws going to change regarding cops? Because they're not superheroes, which is proved in the video of the driving while black, which equals death sentence or abuse in USA nowadays. And that's disgusting. So You're right, and I'm glad you. First of all, thank you for the support from the UK. But guys, think about it. If cops are naturally bad people, how come they're not bad people in the UK or Sweden or Netherlands or many other countries where they have proper training? Nobody, like generally speaking, people don't hate the cops there. The cops don't abuse people there. They're not all horrifically evil people there. No, because they got trained to be decent human beings. We train our cops to be monsters and then are surprised every single time that they're monsters. Okay, or they act like monsters. Peter Hamby says cops arrest a black army veteran for a very small infraction, but they let white hillbillies with automatic weapons storm the Capitol. Racism at its finest. And unfortunately, that is true. Let's go to our members section. Before I do that, though, Ryan Jackson, Monica Cruz, and Kimberly all just joined by hitting the join button below. When you join the Young Turks, you could do it through YouTube with the join button. You could do it through Prime, Amazon Prime on Twitch. It's free that way. You could do it anyway on Twitch, by the way, even if you don't have Amazon Prime. Of course, you can become a member, and that's super important to us, right? You could do it through tyt.com/join. Now, if you don't want our voice to get out there more, and you don't want us to fight for you, then don't join. If you do want us to be louder and stronger on your behalf, that's an excellent reason to join, on top of getting more programming. Okay. I'm gonna go to Keldo Head in the member section. No, I'm out of time. All right, guys, I'll read more from the member section next time around. Thank you for your support. I've got more rage for you when we return. Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. I started the show by saying that I'm going to try to have some optimism. That immediately went out the window in the first segment. Those police stories, they drive me nuts and they get me in a rage. So it is what it is. But there's one more element to that story that we shared with you guys, and then there's another police shooting. But let's take it one by one. Anna, go ahead.
So Newsmax host Greg Kelly has a very different take on the brazen excessive force and racism displayed by Windsor, Virginia cops during a traffic stop involving an Army officer by the name of Karen Nazario. Now, Kelly, who I should also note is the son of Ray Kelly, the former New York Police Department commissioner, tweeted this: "Support the troops." Keep in mind, we're talking about an Army officer who was assaulted here. "Support the troops, thank soldiers by 1, allowing them to keep driving during a traffic stop. 2, compliance unnecessary to lawful police orders. 3, don't bother with license plates. Plus, this soldier is special, he's Black and Latino. The cop is only Latino, I mean, who cares?" Now, obviously there's a lot to unpack and debunk here, but to be absolutely clear, we're talking about an Army officer who was pulled over because he allegedly was missing license plates. Turns out he wasn't missing license plates, he was driving a new car and it had temporary license plates. I should also note that he didn't reject the officer's orders, he was complying. And the idea that he did anything unlawful during that traffic stop that led to the assault is absolutely ridiculous. But I think it's important to remind you guys of what happened. Maybe you haven't seen what happened, but this video does a good job in detailing what the officers alleged and what the video actually showed of that violent traffic stop. Take a look.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I ask you what's going on?
Get out now.
I have not committed any crimes.
You're being stopped for a traffic violation. You're not cooperating at this point right now. You're under arrest for, you're being detained, okay? You're being detained for
For a
obstruction of justice.
traffic violation, I do not have to get out the vehicle. You haven't even told me why I'm being stopped.
About 2 to 3 minutes in, Officer Crocker tried to open the driver's door. In his report, he wrote, quote, "When I attempted to unlock and open the driver's door, the driver assaulted myself by striking my hand away and pulled away from Officer Gutierrez's grip." But in his own body camera footage, Nazario is not seen striking anyone. Crocker's report also says that at this point, Gutierrez, quote, "gave several more commands to comply with orders or he would be sprayed with his OC spray. But no such warnings could be heard. Gutierrez just sprayed Nazario, still without either officer having told Nazario what exactly he was pulled over for.
That's up. That's
The car now.
I don't even want to reach for my seatbelt. Can you?
Take your seatbelt off and get out of the car. You made this way more difficult than it had to be. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Can you please talk to me
Get on the
about
ground
what's going
now.
on? Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Why am I being treated like this? Why?
You're not cooperating. Get on the ground.
Officer Gutierrez never told Nazario what he was being arrested for. In fact, he was never charged with anything. But that doesn't matter to Greg Kelly, who also says that Nazario, quote, "wanted a confrontation. This bad lieutenant did everything he could to make this situation as bad as possible. Regarding the gun, most military bases have strict policies on storing weapons. What base was he coming from? Had he been in compliance or non-compliance?" So the post-assault defamation has already begun with right-wing, talk show hosts like Greg Kelly. And Cenk, I don't think we should be surprised. This is standard operating procedure for the right-wing media. It doesn't matter if we're talking about someone who's currently in the military who did nothing wrong, and there's video proving that he did nothing wrong. The right wing will march on with their talking points, as long as the person who has complaints against excessive force happens to be a person of color.
Okay, so let me be very clear. Greg Kelly's obviously racist. So he looks at that video, and the video shows that Lieutenant Nazario, in fact, did absolutely nothing wrong. He had the tags. He put on his blinkers. By the way, one of our viewers wrote this in driver's ed. They teach you if you're on a dark road like that, you're supposed to put on your blinkers and go to the first well-lit place to stop for the police. He did exactly as you're supposed to. Then he followed orders. They said, put your hands out the window. He did. Then they said, get out of the car. He couldn't because he had his seatbelt on. He did. And then at the end, you see the cop telling him, basically, we know this is a false arrest, so you better drop it. Otherwise, we're gonna continue the arrest, okay? And ruin your life and your career. So make sure you don't cause any trouble. Now, Greg Kelly sees all of that, and he sees the cops threaten the guy's life, assault him with pepper spray, and then hit him in the legs with their knees, knock him to the ground. And he says, yeah, of course, this is what you should do. Because what he means is, I saw a black person, I was scared for my life because even though my dad and everybody else in the NYPD and all these other cops, and including these cops, are vicious to black people all the time, we call them violent. We call them violent. You know why? Because people like Greg Kelly are racist. And so when they see something like this, they think, well, that's how a black person should be treated. You and I look at that video and go, the guy didn't do anything wrong. Why the hell are you attacking him? And why won't you just say something simple like, hey, here's why we pulled you over, your tags. Oh, look, you do have the tags, our bad, right? Why don't you do something? Greg Kelly looks at that video and goes, yeah, show that black guy. No, it doesn't matter that you served. You think that makes a difference? No, it reminds me of Jesse Jackson's story. He said this, I heard the story a long time ago and it really shook me. I was a Republican back then and I was like, man, I had never thought of it like that. Now, the remaining Republicans would never have an open mind to seeing anything from anybody else's perspective. Anyway, Jesse Jackson said his grandfather fought his father fought in World War II, okay? And they beat the Nazis, they captured a bunch of Nazis, and then on the train back to the camp, the black US soldiers had to sit behind the Nazis. Okay, so Greg Kelly would look at that and go, oh, of course. What do you mean? I don't see anything wrong. The black people, of course, they're inferior. They should be beat up and and it doesn't matter if they did anything wrong. They're black. What, I have to keep saying something they did wrong? Yeah, the color of their skin is wrong. So I'm done appeasing or babying vicious racists like Greg Kelly. And Ray Kelly, his dad was awful at the NYPD. Everybody kisses his ass 24/7. He did stop and frisk. He did every brutal policy you could possibly imagine. They're vicious, vicious people. So I'm not surprised. But look, the last thing is, the only question is Greg Kelly just can't help himself? Oh, he's the black guy's innocent. Who cares? He's guilty. I hate him. He's black. I hate him. Or he thinks, look, I can see that he's innocent, but all my viewers are Republicans, so they're racist and they're vicious and they hate black people. So I'll smear this guy and they'll love it, and I'll become the #1 host on Newsmax. The answer is probably both.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to get Greg Kelly's thoughts on Kyle Rittenhouse and the fact that he had possession of an illegal firearm, which he traveled with across state lines and then proceeded to shoot and kill 2 individuals in Kenosha, Wisconsin during the Black Lives Matter protest last year. I wonder what his thoughts are, because he seems to all of a sudden be very concerned about gun safety in the context of an Army lieutenant who was driving, doing nothing wrong, got pulled over even though he had temporary license plates. You hear all sorts of right-wing excuses for what Kyle Rittenhouse did. In this case, we're dealing with someone who's serving in the military, someone who the right wing typically would claim they care so deeply about, especially when it comes to NFL players kneeling during the national anthem. I mean, you wouldn't want to insult our troops. You wouldn't want to insult our veterans. I mean, how dare you? But when it comes to a traffic stop like this, where a black and Latino Army lieutenant is abused with excessive force by the police, all of a sudden the bad guy is the member of the military. Not worth the respect. In fact, he should be discharged from the military as a result of being victimized by the cops in Windsor, Virginia.
Anna, if it was a white right-wing lieutenant who was carrying a legal weapon and he's in the service, any chance Greg Kelly goes, oh, I can't believe that Republican white guy had a gun on him? No, he'd be like, Second Amendment rights. How dare the cops stop him? Don't they know that white people are above them? They should just bow down. He's a lieutenant in the army and he's white and he's a Republican. Oh, he has the rights to every kind of weapon you could imagine, okay? That's what Greg Kelly would say. So why the difference? Because Greg Kelly is super obviously deeply, deeply racist. Okay, so now that I'm clear on that, let's talk about Republicans in general, because we have a poll on this. Because look, I used to say, no, I mean, again, I've told you, I used to be a Republican. I knew family members, I knew friends who were Republicans, etc. If you told me back then most Republicans are racist, I would have said, no, that's not true. Some definitely are, but not most. Now, all those folks have left anyway. There's no such thing as liberal or moderate Republicans left. The remaining Republican Party is a toxic stew of racism, in my opinion. So, but maybe you guys are more generous than me. So we have a poll, tyt.com/polls. Is a majority our majority of Republicans racist? Just yes or no, okay? Now, let me back up. Before you vote, hear this fact. They had a new poll out on Derek Chauvin and George Floyd trial. And guess what? More Republicans think that Derek Chauvin is not guilty than Republicans who think he is guilty. They saw him murder George Floyd in front of their own eyes for over 9 minutes. I don't know how much of the testimony they've seen. The testimony is super clear. They say he did not die from drugs. He did not die from a heart condition. He died because you put pressure on his neck. And Republicans see that and go, yeah, but he's black. So what do I care? Not guilty.
Let me give you the actual details of this poll. So it was done by The Economist and YouGov, released this week. Respondents were asked, quote, do you believe Derek Chauvin should be found guilty of murder? Among Republicans, only 31% said Chauvin should be found guilty and 36% said he should not, which is twice as many as the overall respondents who said that Chauvin should not be found guilty. So this is, look, when you see Greg Kelly or other right-wing talk show hosts spout these very obviously racist talking points in response to police brutality or any other incident that's making headlines that day. Understand, like, we make a mistake by thinking that calling them racist or saying, hey, there's evidence here indicating that, they wear that as a badge of honor. They want that. That is what their audience is looking for. That is what their audience enjoys. And I'm not gonna allow anyone to gaslight me into believing that, they're not watching this kind of content on Newsmax or OANN because they find it appealing. They do find it appealing. They 100% find it appealing. And Greg Kelly, he'll watch a video like this and he'll wear it as a badge of honor. So the question of whether or not we have a problem with racism in right-wing media, racism in the conservatives, racism with policing, it's not even up for debate anymore. The real question is, what are Americans gonna do strategically to apply enough pressure to get these low-life, useless politicians to actually do something about it other than paint murals, just to provide a little bit of release to protesters. It's not good enough, okay? I don't care about your stupid murals. I want actual action, and we're not seeing that on a governmental level, both locally or on a federal level.
So they say 36% are Republicans, and that's double the national average. So that means 18% of all Americans saw Derek Chauvin murder George Floyd in front of their own eyes and thought, I'm here for it. I like that he did that, not guilty. And remember, that is not people who said they're not sure. That is people who say they know what happened and they think Chauvin did the right thing by murdering George Floyd. Okay, so now 18% of the country is deeply racist. By the way, how are we not supposed to watch out? If you're a minority in this country, knowing that 1 out of 5 people hates you. I mean, I'm talking about deeply racist. I'm not talking about normal racism, light racism, back of your mind racism. I'm talking about 1 out of 5 people in this country hate blacks, Latinos, and other minorities and think it's totally acceptable to murder them. Okay, so that's where we are as a country. I don't know how we're supposed to get back together.
Things are looking bleak. I'll leave it there. But for now, we do have to take our break. When we come back, we have an entirely different story involving police brutality to get to, this time in Minnesota. Come right back, I'll give you the details.
All right, back during the break, let me read some of our comments from the member section, tyt.com/join. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders wrote, and I guess every time they said support the troops, I came with an asterisk, unless he's black. Well, that's what it looks like. The mathematician writes, in New York City, we have a saying for those of you shocked by the black cops' behavior. Black cops are blue first, black second. So look, that's him saying it, that's not me saying it. I don't know what goes through people's heads. I know we brainwash cops to be vicious. They didn't walk in that way, they walk out that way. All right, Keldo Head says, I used to think that body cams would solve a lot of brutality. Nope, cops continue to abuse their powers and brutalize minorities because they are never held accountable. Corrupt police unions and racism that permeates every facet of law enforcement. And look, it's partly the racism, as we've talked a lot about, and but it's hugely about power. Story we might do tomorrow on the show. Boston Police Union head, by the way, been sexually abusing young kids since 1995. Internal Affairs said, yeah, he did it. He molested little children. The union and the cops and the entire government protected him. They kept him on the force and they let him abuse kids for decades. Why? Because you're not allowed to question cops. They have ultimate authority. That's not our system of government. hell no. We have got to wreck this mentality that police cannot be held accountable. We have to absolutely positively destroy that toxic mentality. Yes, they can and they should be held accountable. And every time, the very top should be held accountable. Whoever allowed that kind of law breaking should immediately be fired and, by the way, imprisoned. Eclectic Miscellanea writes in, hi all, listening to TYT in the car on the trip back home after being out of town a few days. My wife, who doesn't usually watch the show, was the one who remembered it was TYT time and asked if we could put it on. Could this mean that Mrs. Eclectic has finally been won over to TYT? I guess. So Mr. and Mrs. Eclectic, wonderful to have you with us and thank you for remembering. Selam Kardeşim writes in, if Lieutenant Jesus had gone through the same horrible incident, Newsmax would have unequivocally stated he had a gun under his robes. Yeah, of course. If Jesus of Nazareth was as brown as he would normally be coming from that region, and the cops treated him this way, the Newsmax and Greg Kelly would say, of course he had it coming. They should have hit him on the other cheek, and then they should have put him on a cross, as long as he's brown or black. I unequivocally say that. I'm positive Greg Kelly would say that, being the deep racist that he is. All right, Stephen McCullum and Bartside just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Thank you, we appreciate it. Detroit Microsound makes a great point on using YouTube Super Chat. Said, cops are there to protect property and serve those that hold the power. Guys, let's keep it real. That's just what it is, okay? They're not, like, yeah, peripherally, they're supposed to protect you from harm, but really their main job is to protect property and power. And they do that pretty well, unfortunately. Exoteric Dragon says, for God's sake, Biden, speak up. And so far, he's only spoke up against the protesters. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Anna, take it away.
National Guard troops were called to respond to protesters following the police shooting and death of a 20-year-old man by the name of Dante Wright. He was unarmed at the time. Wright was also shot by a Brooklyn Center cop in Minnesota during a traffic stop. The cop alleged that Wright had an outstanding warrant, which he discovered after he had pulled Wright over. Now, Wright's mother was on the phone with him as he was being pulled over, as the incident was unfolding, and we should hear what she has to say about it. Let's take a listen.
My son was 20 years old. He got pulled over for having air fresheners in the car that I just gave him.
2 weeks ago.
All he did was have air fresheners in the car and they told him to get out of the car. He got out of the car and his girlfriend said they shot him. He got back in the car and he drove away and crashed. And now he's dead on the ground since 1:47. Nobody will tell us anything. Nobody will talk to us.
Y'all gotta talk to her now.
The BCA just says that they are investigating it. I asked them to please take my son off the ground. He's been there since 1:47 this afternoon.
They left my son on the ground for 8 hours in his house. Couldn't even donate his order. They're not gonna give me no information.
So a lawyer on Twitter, I'm not certain if this is an attorney representing the family here, but nonetheless, it was confirmed that earlier today, Dante was shot to death during a traffic stop, reportedly about an air freshener obstructing a mirror. And so that was later confirmed during a press conference by the police department. And I do want to actually get to that video because while there's still many unanswered questions about what happened during that traffic stop, the cops, the chief specifically, Tim Gannon, has confirmed that the shooting appears to have been a mistake. Listen to what he has to say with his own words.
As you can hear, the officer, while struggling with Mr. Wright, shouts, "Taser, taser," several times. That is part of the officer's training prior to deploying a taser, which is a less lethal device. That is done to make her partners aware, as well as the subject, that a taser deployment will be imminent. During this encounter, however, the officer drew their handgun instead of their taser. For informational purposes, we train with our handguns on our dominant side and our taser on our weak side. So if you're right-handed, you carry your firearm on your right side and you carry your taser on the left. This is done purposefully and is trained. As I watch the video and listen to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. This appears to me, from what I viewed and the officer's reaction and distress immediately after, that this was an accidental discharge.
Accidental discharge. Let me just note that this officer has been described as an experienced veteran of the department. Also, I would just say that a gun feels a little different from a taser, but it is important to show you what the body cam footage captured of that incident. So let's look at that final video and then Cenk, we'll go to you. So the vehicle continued to travel for several blocks before striking another vehicle, and luckily, the person in the other vehicle did not get hurt. But in this case, of course, we have a 20-year-old unarmed man who was shot and killed by a cop who had allegedly mistaken her gun for a taser. Cenk.
All right, so this case is a little bit more complicated than most of the cases that we cover. Look, there could be more evidence, and almost certainly will be more evidence that comes out. But for now, looking at that video, he ran. He shouldn't have done that. Should they have shot him for running? No. Did she mean to shoot him or tase him? If all I had was that evidence, I would conclude she meant to tase him. She said taser, taser, taser a number of times. Then after she shoots him, she yells out an expletive, seems genuinely surprised, and then says, I shot him. And so another piece of evidence is when they finally catch up with him after he's crashed and he's bleeding out or already dead, they actually did CPR. That's not what cops normally do. And so when he starts running and he's already shot, he's got to get to a hospital, because 9 out of 10 times in the stories that we've covered, if the police get to you first, they will handcuff you and let you bleed out and die. And so there was some degree of panic here that they had accidentally shot him. It looks like, you guys can make your own judgment. You saw the video yourself. That's my takeaway from it. Now, I don't want you to think like, oh, okay, well then that's okay. No, it's not okay. It's called manslaughter. And if you negligently shoot someone, like, oh, I meant to tase them, but instead I shot him, that's still a crime. It's just not, if all of that is true, it's just not first degree murder, but it's still a very, very significant crime. You can't just say, oh, I didn't mean to shoot my neighbor, but I shot him and killed him. Okay, then you're going to jail. And so it depends on the circumstances, and that's the situation at hand here. And one of the things that needs to be sorted out is, why did they pull him over? So the family's saying air freshener, the cops are saying he had a warrant for his arrest. So it appears that he did have a warrant out for his arrest, but I don't know whether the cops knew that or they were just pulling over a black guy because that's what they do, right? So, but he did have a warrant and he ran, and he shouldn't have done that because it's a terrible idea to begin with, given how many guys, do you watch the news at all? If you run from the cops, the chance of them shooting you is incredibly high. Are they supposed to? No, they're not supposed to. Do they do it all the time? Yes, they do it almost every time. So, that's why I say it's a complicated story. But if they pulled him over for the air freshener, that's where the problem begins in the first place. And the last thing I'll say about that, guys, Every traffic stop doesn't have to turn nuclear, and every person who runs doesn't have to be shot. So you're only supposed to shoot someone if you think that they are a mortal danger to yourself or to nearby people, an imminent danger. At any moment, they could kill someone else. That guy was running, but he didn't appear to be an imminent danger. If she really thought she was tasing him, that might, given that he was still there, depends on the police protocol there, that might have been a logical thing to do, I don't know. But shooting him was nowhere near logical, and just, yeah. It's clear that we've seen far too many cases where they think, oh, he's running away, instead of trying to apprehend him later, let's just be done with it. And that's not acceptable.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about something completely different. And that has to do with anyone who wishes to serve as a whistleblower to call out the US government and its wrongdoing, and what they're likely to be met with by the government in the form of the Espionage Act. Former intelligence officer Daniel Dale is currently being prosecuted for allegedly violating the Espionage Act. He was the one who blew the whistle on the US government's illegal drone program. In fact, there's much that we know about the drone program that we wouldn't know if it weren't for Daniel Dale, basically spreading the actual truth about what was going on with the military and this program to journalists like Jeremy Scahill. Now, I want to give you some details about where that prosecution stands right now, because Hale conceded to giving documents about the US drone program to an investigative journalist, unnamed in court documents, but clearly they're talking about Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept, and anonymously authoring a chapter in the assassination complex inside the government's secret drone warfare program. Now, he has actually just pleaded guilty. And the way that the Espionage Act works essentially does away with many of the rights that the whistleblower would have in this case, and I'll get to that in just a second. But in this role as a signals analyst, Hale was involved in the identifying of targets for the US drone program. Hale would tell the filmmakers of the 2016 documentary National Bird that he was disturbed by the uncertainty if anyone I was involved in killing or capturing was a civilian or not. There's no way of knowing. So oftentimes these drone strikes were carried out with faulty intelligence, and clearly he had moral and ethical issues with that, which he shared with reporters. Now, during the filming of National Bird in 2014, Hale's home was raided by the FBI in connection to an Espionage Act investigation. Hale explained that he thought he was being targeted in part for being a former intelligence analyst now involved in political activism. And I would argue that he is correct in believing that. Now, again, in late March, he pled guilty to 1 count of violating the Espionage Act. He has been charged with 4 counts. But before I give you some more details about what the government is doing to essentially target him and other whistleblowers, Cenk, take it away.
Yeah, so there's 2 components to this story that are maddening. Number 1 is the fact that he's facing prosecution at all. And 2 is how they've basically disallowed him from doing his own defense. They won't let him defend himself in any way, shape, or form. It's unbelievable. This Espionage Act is trash. All it does is it targets whistleblowers. Do people leak inside the government this kind of information other than folks like Hale? Yeah, all the time, daily. They leak it to reporters, but it's to show how great they are and how awesome the government is and how wonderful they are at killing people. And so that never gets prosecuted. There's no Espionage Act used on those folks at all. This is selective prosecution of people who are showing government wrongdoing. It's disgusting. And by the way, the person who really put it on overdrive, as a lot of you know, is Barack Obama. There's no excuse for it. I don't care what kind of Washington ass kisser you are, Barack Obama, but what he did with the Espionage Act was unconscionable. I want to give you more details of the drone program in a second, but Anna, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on a really good point that you were making about the double standard in regard to leaks, because there's a very clear difference, right? People like Daniel Hale, other whistleblowers that we've talked about, Edward Snowden. The difference between them and other leaks that happen in the press is that oftentimes when intelligence officials do these leaks, they do it in order to garner support for US militarism abroad, or they do it in order to garner support for a US-led coup in a different country where a democratically elected leader is the new target to be overthrown by the US government. In those cases, what it does is it helps to further what the US government, specifically what the Pentagon wants to do. In this case, we're dealing with whistleblowers who actually have a moral and ethical issue with how the US government carries out its militarism abroad or surveillance on Americans here domestically. And so if you're gonna try to hold the government accountable, well, under the Espionage Act, you could be a target of the US government, and that's certainly what's happening with Hale.
So let's talk about how barbaric this drone program was, and Daniel Hale is one of the reasons that we know about how barbaric it was. They created something called a kill chain, so that sounds great, where people would be summarily executed. They would have baseball cards and they would show the president, okay, here's the guy's picture, here's why we think he might be a terrorist, and he might be holding this cell phone, which we've been tracking. It might be somebody else who's holding the cell phone, but can we press the button and murder him? And the president would sign off on that murder, and that's all it is, guys. You can pretty it up, and I know everybody on MSNBC will be crying tears of how dare you say that about the sainted Barack Obama, but he signed off on murder warrants, including of US citizens, without any trial, without any judicial process at all. It's one of the worst abuses of power I've ever seen. Fox News has never criticized them for it because they love summary execution of US citizens. So they didn't mind that at all, at all. That's a thing they could have gone after him for, and they didn't. So US citizens like Anwar al-Awlaki were killed. Scahill and others at The Intercept also report on that. But not only that, his 16-year-old son, also a US citizen, was killed. Later, his daughter, I think she was about 8 years old, she was also killed. The government told us those were all wild coincidences. By the way, 3 different bombings. 3 different bombings. And they were all accidents or etc. But they don't even, and because of Hale, we know, they don't even classify them as accidents. They call them enemies killed in action. And Hale explained one more thing. He said, these so-called targeted killings, during one 5-month period, more than 90% of those killed by the US airstrikes were not the intended targets. This is a brutal execution program. And by the way, did Trump continue to run Obama's program? Of course he did. And he amped it up. But Obama started executing US citizens first. That's a very uncomfortable fact, but it is a fact. Now let's turn to, or I'll let Anna tell the rest of the story, but I can't wait to tell you how our government cheats and makes sure you never find out that this person actually is innocent.
Right, and look, it's amazing how much the government targets these whistleblowers, because let's keep it real, they're under the assumption that if this kind of leak gets out, if this kind of story gets published, then there's going to be an overwhelming backlash against the Pentagon, against the US government and its illegal drone program. And to be sure, I mean, for people paying attention, yes, there's some backlash, there's some criticism, but to be clear, like the majority of Americans don't really seem to even care about this, right? We're killing innocent civilians abroad, and most Americans aren't paying attention. Most Americans don't care, but still, you'll have the government go after whistleblowers like Hale very aggressively. I just wanted to also fill in a few more details about what was reported as a result of Hale's whistleblowing, because as you mentioned, Cenk, these targets are called from a secret terror watch list, which include US citizens. Information about potential targets is transformed into baseball cards and given to the president, who then has the option to sign what is essentially a death warrant. If the president signs off, the military has 60 days to carry out a lethal strike against a target. And again, yes, he brings up the fact that oftentimes the intelligence necessary to figure out where the target is incredibly faulty. So moving on, a whistleblower indicted under the Espionage Act virtually has zero chance at a fair defense. That's really what the issue here is. And the Espionage Act has been around for a while, but Obama was the one who essentially decided to use it, right? Previous administrations just kind of allowed the Espionage Act to remain dormant, even though there were whistleblowers in decades prior to the instances that we're talking about now. Now, the law allows for no public interest defense. Whistleblowers are gagged from explaining their actions. Defense attorneys are barred from uttering the words whistleblower or, get this, First Amendment within earshot of the jury. And so since all of that matters for sustaining a conviction, is a defendant, I'm sorry, let me start that again. Since all that matters for sustaining a conviction is that a defendant gave classified information to someone not entitled to receive it, that's all the jury is allowed to hear. So some of you might be wondering, okay, well, why did he plead guilty to that one count of violating the Espionage Act? He really has no choice. He has no ability to really defend himself as a result of how that act was written and implemented.
Okay, so let me go through these as quickly as I can. Anna mentioned some of them, but you can't argue that you did it for the public interest, but that's what he did it for. So you say to him, you're not allowed to tell the truth about why you did it. This is America. This is America where you're not allowed to defend yourself because of the magical Espionage Act. Before Obama, you know what the Espionage Act was used for? Almost exclusively against socialist leaders and labor leaders. It's always been trash. And the fact that Obama revived it is grotesque. You're, like Anna said, you're not allowed to say the word whistleblower, but that's your main defense, that you're a whistleblower. Now, if you're a corporation, you can say, I have my First Amendment right to bribe every politician in America. But if you actually want to use the First Amendment to report what the government is doing, they're like, no, a human being can't use the First Amendment, corporations can, but we're gonna put you in prison if you even mention the First Amendment in your defense of this nonsense charge to begin with. You can't challenge whether the documents were misclassified. So what if the document was, hey, I had a burger for lunch, and the guy told a reporter that you had a burger for lunch? Doesn't matter, it was accidentally classified as top secret. You're going away for the rest of your life. You're not allowed to make that defense. This is America. This is America. It gets worse. Okay, the government, I'm quoting here Jacobin, the government even sought to bar the defense from arguing that an alternative perpetrator committed the charged crimes. So you can't say, I didn't do it, somebody else did. Well, then what the hell can you say? And the answer is nothing. We've already decided you're guilty because you dared to reveal the terrible things that the US government was doing. Hence, we've stripped you of any potential defense you have. So then the cherry on top is, he goes, well, okay, I literally can't put on any defense. So I'm forced to do a plea deal. Otherwise, they're gonna put me away for decades. They're gonna, my life is over, right? So he says, okay, fine, I agree to the deal on this one charge. The government then says, we were lying. We're not gonna dismiss the other 4 charges. Well, what the hell happened to the plea? It doesn't matter, you don't have a defense. And now you made the mistake of agreeing with us. Didn't we just tell you we were barbaric? We should have never agreed with us. So now we're gonna wait for the judge to sentence you. And if he doesn't sentence you harshly enough, which was the whole point of taking the plea deal, was that you don't get sentenced that harshly. But we want it anyway, despite the fact that we got the plea deal. And if we don't get it, we're gonna bring the other 4 charges. Okay, and whose government is doing this right now? Is it Trump's? No, it is Joe Biden's administration that's doing it. Don't let anybody on MSNBC and CNN and New York Times lie to you, okay? Because, Joe Biden, he's such a saint. Obama's a saint. Only the Republicans are the bad guys. When the Democrats crush the average guy and do terrible things with the government and execute US citizens in an extrajudicial judicial way, by the way, totally illegal under international law, their law breaking and their use of the Espionage Act is saintly because they're Democrats. No, it's nothing but a lie. Let Daniel Hale go right now. They won't because they're barbaric, but they should. If we had any justice and if we meant any of the marketing that America purports to represent itself as, we would let people like Daniel Hale go. But instead, we'll probably treat them brutally for telling you the truth. In case you're wondering, is there any precedent for this? We told you about other times that Obama used the Espionage Act. One of them was against a CIA officer who revealed that the CIA was torturing detainees. It's illegal under international and US law. He's the only one that went to prison for torture. The guy who let you know we were torturing people. None of the people who actually did the torture went to prison. That's the injustice that is the US government under both Republican and Democratic administrations.
That does it for our first hour. We're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, conservatives are having a difficult time finding something to complain about with Biden's administration, and I love watching Fox and Friends fail. So we got that and more coming up in the next hour. Stick around, we'll be back in just a few.
Came in late to watch TYT Old School, and I hear Cenk Uygur talking about napkins. Is this the kind of nonsense Anna Kasparian was talking about? Gotta love membership privileges. Gotta love them.
Please have Dave on every 4 episodes or so.
Watching Ben Mankiewicz and Cenk Uygur on Old School talking is exactly like watching Seinfeld and George. I'm not sure if that's a compliment.
Who's on Old School today? Is there one? At Dave Kohler. I hope it's not Brett Ehrlich.
This episode of Old School has killed me. Who knew a conversation about good and bad underwear could be so hilarious and relatable?
Couple things about this video. Dave Kohler looks so badass.
There's more than a 73% chance this Old School will be really funny. Cenk Uygur has been up since 4 a.m., so he's tired. Hence, everything will seem funnier to him. P.S. Remember, food talk, new words, and no or very little politics.
Dave Kohler, enjoyed performance on Old School. Can we please hear about your time as a geologist? One geologist to another?
I appreciate that all these people enjoy it because I know Cenk loves to do it, and he does it because he knows the fans love it too.
This looks like a conspiracy. This looks like a scheme to defraud.
The Bush administration put folks into the regulatory agencies who believed in destroying regulations.
Memories of the Great Depression are faded.
They stood on the floor of the Senate day after day attacking what they were trying to do.
They just generated all this junk, took home huge bonuses, and then when it collapsed, they said, oh, not us.
What they ginned up was pure extortion, putting a gun to the head of Congress.
Time and again, they heard the devastation that was happening in low and moderate income communities caused by bankers, by lenders, and they chose to ignore it.
I understood that the SEC was not merely a weakened version of what it was supposed to be. It was an agent of Wall Street.
When no one's enforcing the law, the criminals take over.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country.
Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not saying how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Dog on the White House lawn, would that be?
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Want to get to all the stories, so let's keep going. What do you got next, Anna?
Well, conservatives don't know what to do with Biden's infrastructure bill, and it's just like one of my favorite things to watch. So it's pretty hard to find an effective talking point against proposed government spending on infrastructure when the vast majority of Americans, including Republican voters, favor it. It's even harder to make it seem like creating 2.7 million jobs, adding those jobs to the economy is somehow a bad thing. But Fox and Friends tried. So let me set this up for you a little bit because it's important to know the context under which this conversation started. And it had to do with the fact that Pete Buttigieg, who yes, is the current Secretary of Transportation, tried to clarify during an interview with Chris Wallace that he had misspoken about how many jobs would be created under Biden's infrastructure plan. Buttigieg had to walk back comments he previously made that the bill would lead to 19 million jobs. An expected post-pandemic economic boom should lead to 16.3 million jobs in the next few years, which means the infrastructure bill will be responsible for creating 2.7 million additional jobs. So look, let's also be honest about the fact that Buttigieg did a terrible job in messaging, and he needs to be precise in his messaging, because had he been precise, Fox and Friends wouldn't have an opportunity to do the segment that we're about to show you. He did misspeak. But nonetheless, listen to them try to downplay the addition of 2.7 million jobs as a result of Biden's proposed infrastructure bill. Take a look.
Would you agree that you and the president and Brian Deese, the economic advisor on this program last week, you all exaggerated the jobs impact? You're the one who cited Moody's Analytics as 19 million, and it's actually 2.7 million, which is a bunch, but it's not what you said.
It's part of a scenario that Moody's says will create 19 million jobs. But the bottom line is it's going to add jobs. And this is a direct refutation of people who are saying otherwise. So yeah, you're right. I should be very precise. The difference in jobs that particular analysis suggests is 2.7 million more. That is a great place to be.
So not as many jobs as they promised. If the economy is already going to create 16 million, this is only going to create, what do you say, 2.7?
Plus, we got the jobs number last week, and it was the economy added 900,000 jobs. Normally, a president would be rushing to the microphone to talk about, look how great the economy is going. But Joe Biden didn't do that because it would screw up his argument. Hey, we need to pass this $2 trillion. Next thing.
By the way, Cenk, I want to also note that it's not just conservatives who are pushing that talking point about how like, oh, we don't need the infrastructure bill. We don't need to create jobs because the economy is already improving on its own. So we don't need those, well-paying jobs that would actually be better for Americans as opposed to what we're experiencing now, which is, the same, job creation that was bragged about during the Trump administration. Low quality jobs, low paying jobs, jobs where people cannot actually put food on the table for their children or pay their rent, even if they're working full time. What we're talking about with the infrastructure bill is proposed jobs that would be created with renewable energy in mind. So these would be long lasting jobs. Yes, there would be some construction jobs as well, since this has to do with building the country's infrastructure. But it's just hilarious to watch them try to downplay the creation of 2.7 million quality jobs that would be created under this proposal.
I know that when I say Democrats suck at politics, a lot of people out there think like, oh yeah, I mean, well, what would you know? They're the elites. They have all the status. There's cabinet secretaries and they're congresspeople and senators, and we're told by the mythology of America that means they merited it and they were wonderful, special, incredibly bright people. Okay, you can choose to believe that if you want, or 98% of them got elected because they were the ones that took the most corporate money. Anyways, bottom line is they have no idea how to do politics. So here's what Buttigieg should have said to Chris Wallace. And don't get me wrong, Chris Wallace's question is perfectly legitimate, okay? Buttigieg should have said, oh, you're right, I misspoke. I said that we'd be creating 19 million jobs with the infrastructure bill. But Chris, I really want your audience to know this. No, all of Biden's programs combined, according to the experts, would create 19 million jobs. The infrastructure bill is slated to create 2.7 million jobs. I don't know if you're asking me to apologize for creating way too many jobs, but that's what we're gonna do. And you can keep on asking it, and I'll tell you all the amazing jobs we're gonna create. We're gonna add 2.7 million jobs, and you're complaining? You're complaining that, oh, the infrastructure bill doesn't create enough jobs? Okay, great, we can add more money to it, we'll create even more jobs, right? Now, when you turn to Fox News, these are the guys who just a couple of days ago were talking about, oh, Keystone Pipeline, Biden ended. That might cost 10,000 jobs. Now they're saying 2.7 million jobs. That's not even as much as Buttigieg promised. It's only 2.7 million jobs. Wait, is 2.7 million lower than 10,000? I know that conservatives have a war on math, so I'm not sure that they could actually add. But yes, for those of you in the reality-based world, 2.7 million is a much larger number than 10,000. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for Democrats to keep pounding their message about how many jobs they're creating. Anna, sorry, one last thing. So Biden, Fox News is right, so we're fair, that Biden's kind of hiding that 900,000 job number because it's such a big, great number. And he's worried that Republicans are gonna use it against them and say, oh, well, you don't need 2 trillion in the infrastructure bill if we're adding so many jobs already. Wrong strategy. Correct strategy is you go do a big press conference, go, damn right I added nearly 1 million jobs. I'm a giant job creator. Good news, I got 19 more million jobs coming in that direction. So I created a lot of jobs now, and I'm gonna create even more jobs later. What now?
Yeah, you know who would do that? Obviously, he would say it without actually accomplishing it, but Donald Trump would. I mean, Donald Trump, without actually creating jobs. I mean, under his watch, there were jobs that were shipped abroad, right? I mean, and he said that he was gonna bring coal back, clearly.
The Makes and Break Beat Live is when it makes your backbone twitch.
All right, guys, sorry, we had a little bit of a technical issue there with Anna Scott. We'll be back in the studio, hopefully, starting next week. But Anna's back, and she was talking about how Trump would take credit for it, even if he didn't do it. And I wanted to let you finish your thought there.
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap it up, I mean, Donald Trump took credit for accomplishing things that he didn't even accomplish. And it didn't even matter. It didn't even matter if the very people who are listening to that message were actually harmed by his economic policy. Inequality continued to grow in the country. The rich continued to get richer, the poor kept getting poorer. Blue collar workers were not actually helped by Trump's economic policies. All he cared about was how the stock market was performing. But it didn't matter. He still went on national tours. He kept bragging about how great he is and all the wonderful things he's doing. And somehow that messaging worked. In the case of Joe Biden, I mean, there's none of that. And what's amazing is that he was critical of Obama for not being, braggy enough about his post-recession stimulus bill, which, by the way, there wasn't really much to brag about there. It didn't offer enough economic relief to Americans who had been screwed over by these predatory loans in the lead up to the recession. But nonetheless, it's incredible to see, like the worst politician who very brazenly was looking out for the best interests of the wealthiest people in the country go on these national tours to brag about how wonderful he is, and it worked. And then on the other hand, you have someone who has a decent proposal for infrastructure and creating jobs. And I mean, he just doesn't have it in him. That's not who Biden is.
No, but look, there's a giant mistake that the entire Democratic Party does. It's not just about Biden. They think they're being classy. That's not how politics works.
Let's get past it, guys. Let's get past it, please. It's just so pathetic. Classy? Like, I'm not saying stoop to the level of Trump, but you gotta get dirty and you gotta fight. And I'm not seeing that by corporate Democrats at all. And honestly, choosing someone as inexperienced and clownish as Pete Buttigieg to be the transportation secretary when you wanna roll out this bold infrastructure bill is ridiculous. But that was a mistake that he made, and sure enough, you have this inexperienced former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, bungling interviews on Fox, or bungling interviews, all over the place because he's not the right person for that role. But it doesn't matter, he dropped out of the primary, opening up the path for Joe Biden to win the Democratic primary in the election. So here we are, with absolute weak, clownish behavior by corporate Democrats. Congratulations.
Yeah, politics is about marketing and framing and branding. That's why Trump was so successful, because he would pound the message home until everyone heard it, whether it was true or false. When Democrats are right, they whisper it and then they apologize for it. They're so bad at this. Biden won, and now all the mainstream press pretends as if it was a landslide. He won by 43,000 votes in 3 states. And they nearly lost to Trump twice. They just don't understand politics.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we have some updates on progressives and what they've decided to do in their political calculations. Are they fighting corporate Democrats, or have they decided to take a more conciliatory tone? I'm sure some of you know the answer. I want to give you the details. Come right back.
During the break, first I want to tell you about a programming note. We got an Earth Day special coming up on Thursday, April 22nd. Okay, so you're gonna tune in at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We hope it could be on tyt.com/live, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You could also find it on YouTube TV, Pluto TV, Samsung TV Plus, Comcast Xfinity X1, and Flex, and Roku, and Xumo. Yes, we're on all those places, and yes, our Earth Day special will be on for all those places as well. 8:30. April 22nd, Thursday, so don't miss it. And now I'm gonna go to YouTube Super Chat. Andrew Gruce says about the shooting in Minnesota, I don't believe the police were panicked because they shot and murdered someone. They were panicked because they had body cams on recording it. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. I don't know how they would have reacted if they didn't know that they were getting recorded. But we do know, yes, they were very worried because they just shot and killed someone on tape. Leith Kristen Merrow writes in on Super Chat, and we appreciate you supporting the program. It's a win-win when you do this. I truly worry what will happen in this country if that murderer Chauvin is found not guilty or gets off because of a hung jury. How can we not all be out in the streets if that happens? And yet, when we do, we'll be giving the right wing exactly what they want. And guys, the number one culprit there is the media. So when they're getting better on covering unarmed black men being killed. In the past, it was brutal. They just my whole life growing up until the last 5 years or so, and that's why I actually do believe in body cams, because they made denying this stuff much harder. The media would all in unison say the police are right, and the police are always right, and they're saintly. And whoever is accusing the police of wrongdoing, they have questionable record, did smear them on the help the cops smear them, help the government smear them. And so that propaganda has existed forever. And whenever there's a protest, you don't see 99% of the people who are peaceful. They love to show that burning building or that looting on a loop 24/7, 24/7. You know how violent black people are, is a subliminal message that the media sends out and has been sending out for decades. And so that's why I harp on it so much, because that is the coding that goes into all of our brains, and that becomes our software. And it's Toxic. Okay, I'm going to Twitch, where there's a lot of wonderful, generous people. The Real Blue Tech gifted 5 subs and 1,500 bits. That's amazing. Those bits matter a lot. Rodney gave us 500 bits. Thank you, Rodney. Columbia Rican gifted 7 subs. I love the community on Twitch. El Estois gifted 5 subs. Maniac Chameleon gifted a sub. Lucinda gifted 9 subs. I like Ben R. Been with us for 8 months and says, "Am I late?" No, you're right on time, brother. Okay, don't worry about a thing. Bad Rongo has been also with us for 8 months and says, "1 more month and I get a dragon baby." That's awesome. That is membership badges on Damage Report. You should check that out on YouTube, and there's other emotes on Twitch. Just become a member. You'll love it, and thank you for being part of us. Back on the Young Turks, Jane and Anna with you guys. Casper, forward.
Before we get to our next story, I just wanted to make a quick note that we do know about the shooting in Knoxville, Tennessee. After the next break, we'll give you guys an update and all the details to that story. It was developing before we went on air, and I wanted to let it develop a little further before covering it. So I hear you guys, we will cover it after the next break, but for now, we have a different story prepared for you, so let's discuss. Progressives in Congress have taken a far more conciliatory approach toward corporate Democrats rather than build pressure by holding their vote as a block. Now, this story has to do with the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and keep in mind that some of the notable progressive Democrats like AOC, Ilhan Omar, these are people who are part of that caucus. And it appears that they're much more willing to just work alongside corporate Democrats as opposed to use whatever leverage they have in order to ensure that their provisions are included in things like Biden's infrastructure bill. Now, one part of the story that you'll notice is that corporate media seems to be applauding this move, even though the same isn't expected of corporate Democrats in Congress. So let me give you the details. As Bloomberg writes, rather than starting a rival group within the Democratic Party, far left members are joining and taking leadership positions in the 95-member Congressional Progressive Caucus that's been around for 3 decades, and they've been largely ineffective. Now, Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar, also elected in 2018, now leads the CPC's vote counting team, and Representative Mondaire Jones also weighed in on this, giving us a little insight into what their strategy is by arguing where we can get victories, we should be concentrating our energies in those places. For example, lowering the age of Medicare eligibility over getting a floor vote for Medicare for all, since there isn't currently enough support in the House to pass the more comprehensive universal health program progressives would like to see. Now, Cenk, that might be a fair point regarding Medicare for all, but there are examples where all you need is just a few progressives to hold their vote in order to ensure that important provisions are included in must-pass legislation. So the economic relief bill that passed, that was must-pass legislation. And progressives could have held their vote and said, no, we're not gonna vote in favor of this unless it includes a $15 an hour minimum wage, for instance. Another example is this upcoming infrastructure bill, the one that was proposed by Biden. There's already some talk about corporate Democrats wavering on corporate tax increases because you have conservative Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin saying that he's uncomfortable with increasing the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%, even though it was 35% prior to Trump implementing tax cuts for the rich. Now, Manchin can hold up legislation, right? Manchin can play tough, hardball. But when it comes to progressive Democrats in the House, they're more willing to just work with what corporate Democrats want as opposed to threatening them with the leverage they have by holding the vote. I know you have a lot to say about this, but please jump in.
Yeah, so there's two parts of the story. One is the strategy of the progressive legislators, and the other is the mainstream media coverage of this that aids and abets, honestly, their surrender. And that's part of the reason why they don't fight, because they're afraid that the media is going to yell at them, and that if they surrender, the media is going to applaud them, which is exactly what's happening in these two stories on Bloomberg and The Hill. They're saying, bravo, way to not fight for any of your priorities. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm gonna give you the quotes and you're gonna see. First, The Hill says, leading progressives like AOC had a choice, and that they chose to, instead of challenging Democratic leaders from the sidelines, or get in the game. That's the way that they framed it, right? Wait, why wouldn't holding up a bill being getting in the game? That would be getting in the game even more. When Manchin does it, you say he's very much in the game. And when Bill Pascrell and other conservative Democrats say they will not vote for a bill unless it has the new tax cuts in it for the blue states, that's being in the game. But when the progressives choose not to use their leverage, you somehow say that means they're not on the sidelines. No, that's the exact opposite of what's happening. That means they are choosing to put themselves on the sidelines and not fight for any of their priorities. I'm gonna prove that more as we go. But Bloomberg frames it as it gives them clout. Clout to do what? You're supposed to use the clout to get your priorities. If you say, I'm going to jettison all my priorities and I have clout, okay, congratulations, your ego is now bigger. Woohoo! Wow, I'm so thrilled for you. They explain, continuing on in Bloomberg, that members of Representative Ocasio-Cortez's so-called squad are taking leadership roles in the House. That must be great for them. And building experience on Capitol Hill. Experience doing what? Passing our priorities? No, passing their like the priorities of corporate Democrats. I don't see how this helps us. Remember when we defeated all those corporate Democrats, the number one thing they would say is, no, don't pick people like AOC. We have all the experience. Experience doing what, okay? And then continuing in Bloomberg, turning them into not just ideological purists, but also strategic legislators. No, wait a minute. How is that strategic? Using your leverage as Manchin is doing, and as the conservative Democrats in the House are using to get their priorities in the bill is being strategic. Saying that you will not use your leverage is the opposite of being strategic. But yet the mainstream media says, attaboy, attagirl, way to not do anything. That way I'll call you smart. If you actually use your leverage, I would call you dumb, and I would call you mean, and I would help Democratic leadership intimidate you. That's just the reality. I don't care if anybody gets uncomfortable with that. That is what's happening in Washington, but there's so much more. They say liberal Democrats are also advocates for direct payments to individuals and for housing and food assistance, as if those are the concessions that they won in the COVID relief bill. Wait, who was against housing and food assistance? That was the whole point of the bill. Literally, no one was against that in the Democratic Party. Advocates for direct payments to individuals, they ran all the ads saying they were gonna give $2,000. Everybody was in favor of that. They're making it seem like, oh, you're so strategic. You won the things that 100% of Democrats agreed with. You know what that means? In reality, you won nothing. Bupkis. You didn't get any of your priorities. And Bloomberg clarifies, and they're vowing to continue pushing for the $15 minimum wage. In other words, they didn't get their priority of the $15 minimum wage. And by the way, is that even true? No, that's not true. You go to the Hill story and you ask them what their 5 priorities are. $15 minimum wage is not among them. So they have, now this is, guys, what's amazing about this is that Chuck Schumer, one of the top corporate Democrats of my life, has said publicly that he's considering putting the $15 minimum wage in the infrastructure bill. That's a gift from the gods. I'm shocked by that, and I know why he's doing it, because he doesn't want AOC to run against them in New York, right? And the progressives in the House, and by the way, in the Senate, they're just letting it go. They're just going, oh, we're not even gonna make it part of our priorities. Schumer has outflanked them on the left. They've let Democratic leadership pretend to be on their left. And they have not asked for a single thing that's in our priorities. Is Medicare for all in there? No. Is $15 minimum wage in there? No. Are any of the other, police reform in there? No. You name a major progressive priority. They have not fought at all for any of them. It is a stunning surrender to a standing ovation by the mainstream media.
And I think part of what we're noticing with the left, and I know that that's an incredibly vague term, a lot of the conversation, a lot of the debate has been focused on whether or not someone is a fraud, whether or not someone is actually going to carry out what they were voted to carry out in representing the best interests of progressives who want leftist policies implemented, who want a $15 an hour minimum wage, who want to do big, bold structural change to what we've been experiencing, the very structure that's led to the inequality that we're experiencing right now. And part of the reason why the conversations have devolved to that is because we keep seeing progressive lawmakers abandon what they claim they're there for, and they're playing patty cakes with corporate Democrats. And then at the same time, look, here's the thing. If their strategy was actually in some way successful, okay, fine, then we're having a conversation. But as Cenk laid out, they have not been successful. And at the same time, what we're seeing is, these conservative Democrats, people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, use their leverage, and corporate Democrats concede to them, they cave to them, they do everything and anything to appeal to them to ensure that they can pass their legislation. It's insane. One other thing I wanted to mention, Cenk, is that in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, there's 95 members, right? Now, Nancy Pelosi cannot afford to lose many Democratic votes when it comes to legislation. She has the majority by just 7 votes, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I'm referring to the progressives having leverage. They could essentially sink a bill unless they get what they want. But here's the catch. So the CPC, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, changed its rules after last year's election to require members to vote as a block on issues that are supported by 2/3 of the group, at least 2/3 of the time, similarly to the unity pledge that the Conservative House Freedom Caucus requires. Okay, well, if you're a progressive, a real progressive, and you don't agree with that, and you don't want to just go along with what a bunch of fakers in the Congressional Progressive Caucus want to do, then form your own block. Why even be part of this caucus if they're unwilling to actually hold Nancy Pelosi, Democratic leadership, accountable, right? The CPC has not gone against Nancy Pelosi once. They've been incredibly ineffective, and they refuse to go against her. So is AOC, and I don't mean to just pick on her, but are progressive Democrats in Congress gonna get what they want by playing patty cakes with Nancy Pelosi? No, they're not. They haven't succeeded so far. What makes them think they're gonna succeed moving forward?
Look, I gotta be honest with you guys. I'm gonna name one name here. The leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus is Pramila Jayapal. And she, in agreeing to that rule, if the majority of the Progressive Caucus was actually progressive, that would be a fine rule. That's what the Freedom Caucus used on the right wing side to get a lot of their demands. But since the majority of the Progressive Caucus is not actually progressive, what it does is it quashes dissent. And it says to the Justice Democrats in that caucus, you are not ever allowed to vote against us. That makes no sense. Pramila Jayapal is quoted in the Hill story as being proud that she's not like the Freedom Caucus. But the Freedom Caucus got almost all their priorities. That's too much, but a lot of their priorities, right? And everybody in Washington was super frustrated. We have to make another concession to the Tea Party, to the Freedom Caucus, to the Freedom, another concession, another concession. How many concessions has Pramila Jayapal gotten? Nearly none. None. And she brags about it. So now let me give you more evidence. They go back to Bloomberg. Here's a paragraph from them. And this is revealing, it's accidentally revealing. They write, progressives opted not to withhold their votes against Biden's virus-related package after some of their priorities were excluded. an example of their willingness to accept half measures and push for more in the next bill. But wait a minute, what was the half measure? So I told you what was in the bill before. It was everything that everybody agreed to. The only thing, if you stretch and stretch, is daycare, but that's only for 1 year as kind of an experiment. But Biden said he was in favor of that. So you got a concession out of Biden to do the thing that he promised he would do. And that's what you're bragging about? That's your big win of a half measure? Oh, this is getting embarrassing, guys. Now go to the Hill, and they also accidentally admit that the other strategy is actually the correct strategy. Here's a quote from them. So far, centrists like Manchin have outsized influence in demanding changes to bills when Democrats can't afford more than a couple of defections across both chambers. So while they're applauding the progressives for surrendering, they throw in there, by the way, Manchin, who fights on every bill, gets almost everything he wants. So tell me again, who's being strategic and who's getting played? Now, for the folks who think they have bad intent, I don't agree with that. So you can choose not to believe them. The facts are what we gave you, right? And now when we go to the interpretation, I know through a lot of experience and through studying this from the outside and the inside, that they're being gaslit, that they are generally speaking good people who have really, really gotten themselves to believe that half measures, and which are not half measures, as I just explained to you, they're the Obama model, basically 5%. 5% change is all that they could ever hope for, and that they should bow their heads. And if they do, they will be rewarded with incredibly positive media coverage, which is true. And if they dare rise up to challenge any bill on any progressive priority, that they will be lambasted, and that is true. Well, then I gotta ask, do you have the courage to do what you told your voters you were gonna do? I don't agree with Mondaire Jones. He says, we should push for lowering the Medicare age requirement, but we should not push for Medicare for all vote. Wait, why shouldn't we? So we're gonna get to let another 2 years go by. And we're not even gonna know who the bad guys are who are against Medicare for all. That's exactly right. Pramila Jayapal and the others are protecting the conservative Democrats who want to keep taking money from the healthcare industry and the drug companies and don't want to be put on the record on Medicare for all. So I'm not interested in you protecting your colleagues. I'm interested in you passing bills. And so far, honestly, there's small bills and small priorities that have gotten in there. But in terms of the big ones that we all know, college for all, you name it, none of them have passed. And it looks like none of them even have a prayer of passing, and they're saying they don't even want to try. I've got to give you one last quote. It's from the Hill. Ask why progressives have not flexed their political muscle. So there they are, the mainstream media even admitting they haven't even flexed their muscles. Ask why they didn't do that and threatened to kill Democratic bills to get more of their priorities. See, even the Hill acknowledges if you threaten to kill a bill, not actually kill a bill, threaten to kill a bill, you will get your priorities. So even the Hill, who's trying to applaud him, goes, why are you guys schmucks? Why haven't you flexed your muscles at all? Why haven't you threatened a bill? They say one progressive House aide replied, quote, Democrats believe in government. What's the cost benefit of blowing up a bill? What's the alternative? No, those are fair questions as to what the alternative is. But the alternative
maybe ask Joe Manchin about that. Maybe ask Joe Manchin and other corporate Democrats about that. That question is never asked when it comes to corporate Democrats carrying out the best interests of corporations. But sorry to interrupt you. It's funny how that double standard exists.
Yeah, and they were getting played so badly. Because a lot of them are new to this, right? And they're not experts in this. And they 24/7, everybody in Washington's telling them, whatever you do, do not cause good trouble. Do not cause it. Just listen and get a 5% half measure. All right. Anyway, in this case, what I was gonna say is, look, they think that, then the bill is dead. The bill is not dead. Biden was going to pass COVID relief no matter what. They're going to pass the defense bill no matter what. They're going to pass the budget bill no matter what. They're going to pass the infrastructure bill. The question is are your priorities in it, or are you not, or are they not? If you don't insist on your priorities, then it is an absolute guarantee that they will not be in the bill. The chance of these, they're called must-pass bills because they must pass. The only question is whether you're part of the negotiations or you aren't. And so far, the progressive strategy on this, and again, I gotta be honest with you, the person in charge of that strategy right now is Pramila Jayapal. And her strategy, which she brags about, is no, let us not ask for our priorities. Let us wait for the next bill, as I quoted you earlier, and then hope for a half measure on that next bill. By the way, she said that about COVID relief bill. Here we are on the next bill, the infrastructure bill. And guess what she's saying? Next bill, no. Then you've lost all credibility and it appears you're never gonna fight for us. That means, I mean, look, that really means only the hope left is Nina Turner. If Nina goes in and does the same thing, then all hope is lost. These folks will never fight for us. But there's still hope, and you just need one leader. You just need one person to actually do the right thing, and the rest will be embarrassed and join their efforts. But not one of them right now is sticking their neck out.
Let's take our final break. When we come back, Chris Wallace has a pretty tough interview for Texas Governor Greg Abbott on the issue of immigration. We'll show you that video and more.
Some of your comments here, and you guys are not happy about the progressive strategy. Keldo Head Strategy writes in the member section, we were told to elect these so-called progressives for change, yet they fall in line with the slightest bit of pressure. Absolutely pathetic. Electoral politics is nothing but a scam. What's the point of these politicians when they won't do a damn thing? And that's what the squad and admittedly, so a lot of the Just Democrats, Pramila Jayapal, theoretically a Just Democrat, they're not getting is that the core of the base, you're destroying their hope and their motivation to help and to make any change. Because if we send you in, and God damn it, the Young Turks audience raised $5 million for these folks, right? We send you in, and then you think, oh, I don't need you guys. I don't mean Young Turks, I mean you guys, right? And then you choose to side with Pelosi, you're destroying hope, man. It's Jesus Christ. And they'll hate me for saying this. Whatever, they can hate whoever they like. Do something. The anti-fascist metal hippie writes in, there are mutual aid activists near me, and I would bet near all of us that have done more for our society than all of these politicians combined. Who speaks for us? Well, brother or sisters, we try, right? No More Trigonometry says, when the mainstream media is praising progressives, it probably means they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Incredibly disappointing. Man, our audience is so damn smart. That's exactly right. If when AOC is getting praised by The View and applauded, you remember when Whoopi Goldberg was yelling at AOC and calling, whoa, how dare they call themselves the Just Democrats? That's when AOC was fighting. Later, she stops fighting and she celebrated. And we're talking about Mama Bear on The View. All right, Tina writes in, sorry, when Bernie didn't keep the $15 minimum wage in the COVID relief bill and did it as a standalone, I knew he and the others wouldn't do crap. I was so disappointed with Bernie and now I'm mad at all of them. I can't afford to donate to them if they're doing nothing and I get the same crap as I get without them. I'm happy to replace them with more progressives in a primary. That's absolutely right, Tina. I'm not gonna miss my words. Why would you donate to people who aren't doing what they said they were gonna do? I don't care who they are and how close they were to us. So go to ninaturner.com/hello and give to her instead. Look, if I'm wrong about Nina, man, I'm telling you, I'm done with electoral politics. But I'm not wrong about Nina. And here's what you're gonna see. When Nina acts, they'll all of a sudden grow courage. Oh, because we don't want her to outflank us and get more famous. I'm keep being real with you, okay? Bernie was a huge disappointment, and currently he has no plan. Back on TYT, I just want to thank two more people. Sonia N just joined on YouTube by hitting the join button below. You empower us to fight for you. And then No More Pot for You with a very generous donation on YouTube Super Chat. We really appreciate it. And he says, no more pot for you, like think soup guy. Anywho, this news is really depressing and doesn't seem to get better. I hope you all are taking care of yourself. Keeping the rest of us grounded isn't easy. Love you guys. We love you right back. And on every issue, including pot, which Biden said he was gonna do on the first day, he didn't do. And everyone on MSNBC is got their lips puckered on his ass. We here, I tell you the truth. He didn't do it. He said he was gonna do it, he didn't do it. Progressives said they were gonna fight for $15 minimum wage. So far, not one of them has. One guy actually behind the scenes I know did. Everyone else just sat on their hands, including Bernie, and currently have absolutely no plan to fight for $15 minimum wage. Our job is to tell you the truth. All right, Anna's got breaking news.
There has been another school shooting today. This story is currently developing, so by the time you watch this video, there might be additional details, but I will give you the details that we know at this moment. The shooting happened in Knoxville, Tennessee at Austin East Magnet School, Magnet High School to be specific. A male is deceased. So far, we know of one person who has died. We do not know the identity of that person, and one person has been detained. Also, one police officer was shot, although he is not deceased. He didn't die from the gunshot wound, luckily. And we will learn more details about this story as it develops. But for now, all students have been sent home to their parents, and the area is allegedly secure. So no one else was killed or wounded. Originally, when this story broke, it was reported that multiple people had been shot, but that is not the case. We only know of 2 individuals who were shot, one male who is deceased, and that officer who is alive. And then the thing to keep in mind is that, Knoxville, Tennessee has lenient gun laws, and the situation, not just in Knoxville, but throughout the country, has become so dire that in some instances, like with Knoxville, they have a designated area where when a shooting happens, parents can go to see if they can meet with their kids. I mean, they have that all prepared and ready to go. More preparation for when a mass shooting happens or when a school shooting happens, as opposed to taking a good hard look at whether or not our gun laws make any sense. But as it stands now, Cenk, that's what we know about the story. As you guys all know, we've been covering quite a few mass shootings in recent weeks as COVID restrictions have been lifted, as schools have begun to reopen. Unfortunately, business as usual continues with these school shootings.
All right, so let's do the usual here. Obvious facts that no one's gonna do anything about. Common denominator in every one of these shootings, whether they're Christian fundamentalists, Muslim fundamentalists, right-wing terrorists, or just crazy people, or personal grudge, it doesn't matter. The common denominator is the weapon. And they say, oh, no, but you could kill someone with a rope. You could kill someone with floss. Yeah, I suppose you could. Much harder though, much harder. There's not a lot of drive-by axings. So yeah, the weapons are out of control. We have the most mass shootings because we have the most guns. We've shown you every stat 1,000 times. It's indisputable. So the right-wing folks, or some left-wing folks who just love their guns, and some of them do good things with it, like hunting. They like their hobby so much, they say, well, I'm willing to die with, I'm willing to accept tens of thousands of extra deaths per year because I like my hobby. And that's the best case scenario. But most of it is because of the manufacturers. We have legalized bribery in this country. The entire Republican Party is bought off by the NRA, which gets its money from the gun manufacturers. And we allow terrorists to get weapons. We allow everybody to get weapons. We allow cop killer bullets. We allow everything. The common denominator is the weapon, and it's going to happen near you. Guarantee it. I now have dozens of viewers that have written in saying, Cenk, I remember when you said that 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought, yeah, but it's not going to happen near me. And then it happened near me. Of course, it's going to happen everywhere. There's like 300 million guns in the country. Everybody's shooting nonstop. The OK Corral, like 2 people died. That's a great day in America now when only 2 people die in a mass shooting. And so, and the politicians will do nothing. The Democrats will huff and puff, and then they'll suggest the weakest, softest thing you could imagine, like Biden saying, I'm gonna get rid of ghost guns. Say your policy's a ghost, right? And the Republicans will fight tooth and nail, and there'll be a shooting near you tomorrow.
And I also want to point out that the officer who was shot in this shooting was the school's resource officer, who is usually the person who's supposed to be armed to protect the students from. I mean, that was the whole argument from conservatives regarding why there should be cops on these campuses and how they should be armed, right? They're supposed to protect the students, but in reality, it gives you a false sense of security. The male who has died as a result of being shot appears to be a student. That's based on someone who has direct knowledge of what happened, who did not have the authority to speak about what happened, but that person did speak to the press, and this was reported by the Knoxville News Sentinel. But this is a continuing trend. It happens with more and more frequency. It happens more and more often, and we have a complete lack of leadership when it comes to doing something about it. But I'm sure Biden will create a new commission to study gun violence and then make a decision. Never about what to do about this.
So one more thing about the hypocrisy of the Republicans. Blue lives matter. Unless it's right wingers rioting and murder cops, then it's totally okay. And unless it's people using weapons and those weapons manufacturers give me political contributions, in which case you killed a cop, don't care at all. Look, they don't even make cop killer bullets that could pierce vests. The only reason deers don't have vests, the only reason to have bullets that pierce vests is to kill cops. And they won't even outlaw that because they don't care about blue lives. They don't care about cops. They don't care about anything but the money. So in essence, these politicians allow murders, including of cops, because they want to get paid. That's the sick state of our democracy. And meanwhile, Democrats are still playing patty cakes.
It's also worth mentioning that in the state of Tennessee, its governor had just signed off on legislation that would actually loosen some of their gun laws. So Republican Governor Bill Lee signed off on legislation just last week that would make Tennessee the latest state to soon allow most adults 21 years and older to carry pistols, or carry handguns, I should say, whether it's concealed or open carry. So further loosening of gun legislation or gun laws on a local level, and that's what you're likely to see in many red states across the country. So when you hear conservatives make points about how, look at this blue state that's dealing with a mass shooting, it's because they don't have guns to protect themselves. I say it all the time, I'm gonna repeat it again. We don't live on islands. We are the United States of America, where we can move about freely from one state to the next. So if one state has strict gun laws and the next state does not, it creates a situation in which you need the federal government to come in and show some leadership on this issue. But unfortunately, we don't have that. It doesn't matter if it's a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, the outcome is the same.
So they're going in the wrong direction. They're loosening gun laws. And by the way, how's that worked out for us? More mass shootings. Oops. Okay, we got to go to the post game next, but I want to tell you these wonderful people that are part of our community. Depressed Progressive made us optimistic by giving 7,000 bits on Twitch, which is amazing. The Real Blue Tech gave 2,000 bits and gifted 5 subs. Frank Morningtree gifted 10 subs. If you're a subscriber on Twitch or on YouTube, which you could hit the join button below, or on our website, tyt.com/join, you're about to get the post game. In the post game, we're going to lighten it up. Conservatives attack the Marvel comic universe and a guy quits porn. Hilarious stories. For all the members, we'll be back in a minute. So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Right now, we're currently #1 most engaged news politics network online, beating CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, all of them. We're #1 in total minutes watched. That means not only the number of people watching, but how long they watch. We just crossed 20 million followers and 500 million monthly views. Now, why? That's because actually the country's progressive. It's 2/3 progressive. And you guys have allowed us to be your voice, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So what did we do with that voice? Well, let's look at 2019. We went all over the country talking to you guys and the candidates. So we were in Miami, we were in Detroit, we were in Houston, and we were in Iowa. In fact, we were all over Iowa. You guys were all over Iowa, and all of the candidates saw you guys. We had wonderful people speaking, like the one and only Nina Turner at our rallies. Bernie Sanders stopped by, Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren. We interviewed almost everyone on the campaign trail, with the exception of Biden and Buttigieg. And we held them accountable. We even did a progressive economic pledge, and so many wonderful people signed on to that. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Marianne Williamson, AOC, the entire squad, Justice Democrats, and so many others. Now, on top of all that, we started a show called The Conversation, where we featured so many progressive thinkers, writers, and candidates. And one of the candidates we featured in 2019 was Jamal Bowman. Here comes Jamal Bowman. Then we had an amazing 2020. We hired a climate reporter. Damage Report passed 500,000 subscribers. Young Turks passed 5 million subscribers. We're getting the message out to more and more people. Bernie Sanders comes on in the heat of the primary. He comes on after the election to say what we're gonna do for the future. And then Marie Newman wins. Jamal Bowman wins. Cori Bush wins. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any better, here comes Nina Turner. Hello, somebody. And she's running for Congress, and she comes on the Young Turks first. On election week, we had nearly 2 million hours of viewing. We're #1 destination for progressives. You made all that happen. This is amazing, and thank you for those 2 years. What, I went past 2 minutes? Of course!
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
All right, back on the Young Turks. It's a really bad news day today, guys. Thanks for bearing with us. And we try to make it better for you guys, partly by venting, right? But partly by pushing for action in the right direction. But we're gonna lighten it up in the post game. There's a couple of more fun stories. More, they're way more fun, as in they're slightly fun. Anyways. But
let's talk about how fun or not fun the next stories are. I think we should focus on that. Maybe do a standalone video on it.
Maybe like 2.5 minutes or so. No, let's get it 3. All right. Anyways, but that was all supposed to be a prelude to. Speaking of fun, I checked the poll on whether Republicans are racist. About 500 votes so far. It's 98% to 2%. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, I'm actually annoyed that it's even still a debate. Like, can we get past that debate because it's already been adjudicated? Now the real discussion is, what do you do to overpower that racism and actually get Congress to do what's necessary to reform policing in the country? Like, that's where the 100% of the conversation needs to be there. But we keep going around in circles over and over and over again, not just on policing, but on every important political issue. And on days like today, it's soul sucking. It really is.
Yeah, but I'll tell I don't know if there's a note of optimism or not. By the way, I've never failed on a promise more than being slightly optimistic on today's show. Is that 10 years ago, if any media outlet did this poll, it would have been lopsided in the other direction. At least 80 to 20 would have said Republicans are not racist. At least, okay? And even if we had done the poll, I bet you it would have come out 10 years ago, 50-50, 60-40, saying not racist, right? Now at least people are beginning to wake up to the reality of like, holy cow, man, the racism in the Republican Party is way worse than anyone realized, partly because the mainstream media was covering it up all this time. All right, enough of that. Let's do the other stories.
All right. Right-wing media outlets are claiming that a giant percentage of viewers tuned out of a Disney Plus series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, due to a scene depicting a cop harassing the Falcon because he's Black. So there's no evidence to this, but this is the kind of stuff that conservative media latches onto because they have nothing else to offer up to their viewers, to their readers, or to anyone who made the mistake of consuming any of their garbage content. So Newsbusters, run by the Conservative Media Research Center, claims in its headline that turn off viewers turn off the Falcon and the Winter Soldier after BLM propaganda. And then they go on to like just pull a number out of their ass, like no evidence for it whatsoever. And they claim that 83.49%, very specific, it must have been a scientific rating there, of viewers tuned out the same exact point in each episode. And then I want to read you what the Media Research Center published so you get a sense of the kinds of, it's not just that they're lying, it's that they're not even able to present evidence to make their case, and they even admit that this is a rumor. According to a new rumor put out by YouTuber Overlord DVD. Okay, let's stop. Look, I get that we do content on YouTube, so this might seem like a self-own, but my hope is that people can see the actual evidence that's presented when we're making our arguments, as opposed to us saying like, this rando YouTuber said this, and now we're just gonna repeat it and report it as fact. Like, it's just a rando YouTuber who claims that this happened, but that's it. That's their evidence. Let's continue. So according to a new rumor put out by YouTuber Overlord DVD, not only did a massive number stop watching the episode at the same point across the board, there was a large scale movement of viewers who unsubscribed from the streaming service shortly thereafter. What caused this mass exodus? It was the off-putting inclusion of BLM propaganda in a scene involving the two main characters and the police.
Okay. All right, there's one serious side to this, which I'm like reluctant to even go into, but let's talk about the goofy stuff first. 83.49, Okay, the only way that you would have a fact like that is if you had access to Disney Plus's data, right? I don't know how powerful Overlord DVD is, but that would seem to be hard to come by information. But more importantly, the idea, if you know anything about digital media, including these digital streaming services, the idea that 80 some odd % would all stop watching at that exact moment is preposterous. It's not even within the realm of imaginable. The only way that it could be imagined is if it's in the first 5 seconds. If you told me a video sucked and 83% of people checked out in the first 5 seconds, I would believe that. But if you told me and I watched that episode, it's like in the middle of the episode, it's like really deep into the episode. In random minute number 27, 83% of the audience dropped off all at the same time. I would tell you, you're a moron. There's a 0% chance that happened. You don't know anything about digital media. It is not anywhere near technically possible. But these folks, they're news busters. I don't know, maybe that means they're busting the news. Then that would make sense. Come in and go, yeah, well, there was a rumor on YouTube by the Overlord. And so we're gonna report it as 83.49 dropped off a cliff when they saw a black person pointing out injustice. They hate that, which then leads to the second part. They think that 83% of viewers, the minute that they saw a black person point out an injustice against them, hated it so much because the whole country's racist just like them, right? Because they're projecting their perspective onto everyone else. And they think, oh my God, if I saw a cop discriminating against a black person, I would know that that was a lie because every black person in the country is a liar when they say it, and I would immediately turn off, right? And I guess the whole country is with me, and 83% of the country is deeply racist, that if you show them an injustice about black people, they go, oh, no way, man. All black people are liars. That never happens to them, man. I'm turning off. That's who, what are the Media Research Center, that's the parent company. Media Research Center researched the Overlord DVD YouTube video and decided to go with it. And look, Anna, one more fun part to it. My son watches a lot of these on YouTube, right? And so there's all these theories, there's film theory, etc. And some are really good. I watched some of them after some of the Marvel Comic Universe stuff, like after WandaVision, I was like, oh, okay. Then there's tons of Easter eggs in there and they're fun to watch, right? And even my 10-year-old son, I say even, but like he's infinitely smarter than an adult right winger, can tell what's credible and what's not credible. If you told him that, he'd be like, that has no chance of being true. That's like, you can tell what's real and what's not real. We discuss after the videos, hey, what theory is outlandish? What theory is possible? The idea that everyone would stop watching at one particular time, no matter what happened. Even a 10-year-old wouldn't be stupid enough to believe that, or wouldn't be ignorant enough, not know enough facts to not know that, right?
Yeah. Look, the reason why they do it, Cenk, they do it for a very specific reason. And they do it to spread this perception that talking about this country's very real issue with racism is unpopular. That most Americans do not agree that we have a problem with racism in America. And you see this play out in different contexts involving different political issues. There's a very real reason why you see Twitter bots and Twitter trolls, sock puppet accounts pushing a narrative that usually very powerful people want to push, right? And they want to persuade people that their values or their beliefs or their realizations about what's wrong in the country are not warranted and their thoughts are unpopular. It's a way of propagandizing and pressuring people to disregard realities that we're experiencing in this country. Like, that's the reason why they do it. And to be quite honest with you, as laughable as this attempt is, I would argue that in regard to the messaging wars, conservatives are pretty successful. And it's because they're representing moneyed interests, right? They're usually representing powerful people. Billionaires are currently funding efforts to intimidate progressive professors, or not even progressive professors who don't go along with conservative messaging. They'll go ahead and fund these efforts to shame them and list them in websites. I mean, they have this multi-pronged approach to their messaging, to their propaganda, and it's effective. And part of the reason why it's effective is because it's well resourced.
Yeah, it's a great point, Anna. And the point of it is propaganda, because none of these conservative outlets can last on their own. They, in a capitalist free market, they don't make enough revenue. They would all be out of business within the year. They're almost all financed by right-wing billionaires. And right-wing billionaires have a vested interest in protecting the existing order, including cops, because what do cops mainly do? They protect the powerful, just like one of our viewers said earlier. They protect the powerful and they protect property, and wealthy people love that. And so I don't know if they enjoy the racism, the wealthy people who fund these sites, probably very, very, very likely, or if it's just a collateral damage in their drive to maintain the existing order. And so, I mean, look at what Anna is saying. Think about it, guys. So we just covered 2 stories in back-to-back weeks. In LA, cops pull up. They never got the description that the suspect was black. In fact, it turns out the suspect was white. And they pull over literally the first black guy they see. And they go, it's probably him, okay? And then this week, you had the Army lieutenant pulled over, perfectly good tags. They theoretically pulled him over for his tags. And they throw him to the ground, they pepper spray him, they assault him when he'd done absolutely nothing wrong, because he was a black guy in a nice car. So it happens all the time. It is the lived experience of millions of African Americans, and the right wing says they're all liars. Those millions of African Americans that complain about police brutality and how they're targeted unfairly, every one of them is lying. That's a startling thing to say. That's an unbelievable thing to say. But yet, in our media, because of this propaganda, it's given equal weight. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't know who's telling the truth. Millions of African Americans or the cops who abuse them, who would have a vested interest in not going to jail. I can't tell. And in fact, until recently, the overwhelming majority of Americans were brainwashed by the media to think the cops are always telling the truth and black people are always lying. Isn't that amazing? And this is how they do that propaganda to get that toxic stuff into people's brains. And yes, that's the definition of racism.
All right, now we're gonna do a complete 180 and talk about something I came across this morning on Reddit. That got me thinking, okay? This is the social commentary portion of the show. All right, so Pornhub is a porn site, and it allows users to comment on videos, which is, in my opinion, weird and strange, and most people should probably avoid participating in that. But nonetheless, Lil J Dub wanted to share in a comment that he has decided to retire from his porn viewing habits. He wrote the following: "Boys, I am here not to watch, but to announce my retirement. I have officially found the one person that is right for me. She is brilliant, beautiful, and loyal. Every day I wake up and realize how happy she makes me. The reason I am done watching porn is because it feels wrong, almost as if I am cheating. I hope one day you guys that are reading this find the same thing I have, and I know you all will miss me," because apparently a very common commenter here, "and I will miss you, Lil J Dub signing off." Okay, so that was the comment. So I just, you can be in a happy, loving relationship. You could be like deeply in love and still watch porn, and it's okay. Like it doesn't mean anything about your relationship, right? Like I just think this is like really dumb thinking, and I guarantee you he's already watching porn again. It's okay. It's okay. It's totally fine. But like we need to get out of this like hyper self-hatred, self-judgy like environment based on like I don't know, Ben Shapiro's book about how we should ban porn. I don't know what's motivating this guy. Look, if he personally finds it morally objectionable to watch pornography, cool. Then that's fine. That's your right. No judgment, right? But he's saying this in the context of, well, now I have found the woman of my dreams, and therefore I will no longer watch porn because it's the equivalent of cheating on her. No. And then it gives some women the idea that if their partner is watching porn, then that's some sort of negative reflection on them, but it's not. It has nothing to do with your relationship. I guess that, I know this is like a weird thing to have a serious comment on, but I think it's important, right? Stop making people feel like there's something wrong with them if they, and look, I mean, the dude is gonna spank the salami, like it's gonna happen, right? And he probably uses porn for that reason. And let me tell you something, even if you're in a great relationship, even if you guys are getting it on regularly, you're gonna spank the salami again at some point. Probably you're already doing it, and that's okay. That's the point I wanted to make. I know it's weird, but
it's not weird.
Stood out to me.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Look, it's cultural issue, and the cultural issues drive a lot of things. Anyway, but let's have fun with it. I agree with everything you're saying, but let me add to it. So I grew up in a time where there was no internet. We used to walk to school in the snow with bare feet. No, anyway, and what people of my generation did, or men of my generation did, is that they would accumulate like physical porn, like magazines and things like that. And every once in a while, you'd feel guilty, and then you throw away your porn stash. And then the next day, you would be so mad at yourself. Okay, it was the single most common thing among guys I knew. Oh, I shouldn't have done it. Why did I do it? Right? And to answer your question honestly, Anna, now it's going to get a little serious. I'll get back to fun in a second. The answer is to why people. There was no Ben Shapiro book back then. There's a book called the Bible and the Quran, and they tell you don't do it, don't do it. And so that's the thing that gets into people's heads, and then their parents tell them, and it's cultural, and everybody tells you, you must hate yourself, okay? Your body is a terrible thing. If something feels good, then it must be awful. You should feel guilty, guilty, guilty. And then you're like, oh, and you throw away your porn stash, and then you go, what have I done the next day? So this J-Dub dude, oh, he's already back. Don't be ridiculous. Like he's been back.
And that's okay.
Yeah, of course. And then now, but my favorite part of the story is the porn community. I didn't know that a porn community existed. Like I get that I'm positive there's a community for different niches. You know, we talked about the furries and the feet people and the bald people and the diaper people. I'm sure all of that exists, right? And I'm not at all surprised by that. But I'm surprised that there's a community that are bothering to leave comments on Pornhub. Like, oh, hey, it's J-Dub again. How you doing? Wait, why are we still on here? What?
Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, when you're done, you're done. Like, what are you doing? Like, go find another place to like find friends. Like, why are you doing it here? But maybe I'm being too judgmental. Maybe it's a lovely community and people find great companionship there. Who knows? I don't want to be judgy, but I do think it's weird. Just keeping it real.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Do you leave the comment before or after? Right? Are you going to interrupt to be like, oh, hold on. Look, the lights are all off here, and I think that the cinematographer has got some issues. Hey, what do you all think, right? And should she have been spanked a little lighter or a little harder? Okay. All right, wait, I'm going to continue. All right, I'm going to continue. And then afterwards, well, that was, you know what? On second thought, I thought the conclusion was rather spectacular.
Oh my God.
I just didn't know there was a porn community. That's my bad. Look, I'm not part of that community, but ironically, God bless. No, sure. If you want to talk about it, I guess, and maybe that's a turn on of a different sort. That makes more sense to me, right? And to your point, Anna, about is it saying something about your partner? I love what you said about how it's like I think a lot of people, not just religious people, are putting it in people's heads that it's a negative reflection of your partner. No, it ain't. It's something completely different. So like, for example, we don't do it about food, although some do, but it's also crazy to do it about food. Like, because you want to go eat at a nice steak restaurant doesn't mean your wife's cooking sucks or your husband's cooking sucks, his barbecuing sucks or something. No, it's just different. Like you could appreciate your husband's barbecue on the weekend and still want to go to a steak restaurant because it's different, right? It doesn't it doesn't mean you're cheating on him, right? It doesn't mean you're cheating on her if you go to a nice Italian restaurant that you like. It's the same thing with porn, but there's so much like cultural baggage that comes with porn that it warps people's minds and needlessly makes them feel all of these emotions that they don't need to feel. They just need to have a good time and move on with their lives.
I like how you used a steak dinner analogy to make your point. Like it's just such a male thing to bring up, but I hear you and it's correct. And one other thing, and this is more of a question, but what happens if you and your partner watch together to like get in the mood? Are you guys both cheating on each other? Like it's a form of entertainment. Yes, it's erotica. There's a reason why it's incredibly popular, including in the Bible Belt of this country, where the porn viewing habits tend to be a little more extreme based on some studies and surveys that have come out. And when I say extreme, I mean the amount of porn viewed and the genres of porn that are consumed in the Bible Belt. So don't let other people make you feel guilty about it. But more importantly, I think the number one takeaway is porn viewing habits do not communicate any type of reflection on your partner, okay? And the way that he framed this retirement made it seem as though, oh, now that I've found the right woman, I don't need porn anymore. And that communicates to other women that, hey, if my partner's watching porn, it must mean that there's something wrong with me. And that's just not true.
Just get rid of the shame already. It's based on old rules that make no sense. Look, I'll just do it one more time. The reason why you're not supposed to masturbate, according to the Bible, is because of onan. It's onanism. It's called onanism. It has to do with having sex with your dead brother's wife. It's not even about masturbation. And those rules were written literally, or that passage was written 2,600 years ago. I think that predates internet porn by a little bit. And you're trying to take those ancient rules and apply them to today, and then you're creating all this oppressive shame and guilt in your head to suppress a biological drive that you have. And if you're religious, a drive given to you by God, right? Based on what some rabbi thought 2,600 years ago. That's crazy. Stop believing crazy things because society told you that you're supposed to feel shame and guilt.
By the way, I just came across this completely different. We're moving past the porn story. ArcLight Cinemas and Pacific Theaters have shut their doors for good. They will not be reopening.
Oh, yeah. No.
Reported by Deadline.
That's devastating.
It is.
So I was just getting a haircut today. I don't know if you noticed. And we were talking about how when it's May 1st and I'm 30 days past my Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which I got on April 1st, I'm going to a movie and I'm eating popcorn. But in LA, all the best movie theaters are ArcLight. And what was the other one that is gone now?
Pacific.
Oh, Pacific. Theaters. That was Pacific Theaters were all Santa Monica, right? So. Man, we're almost out of this damn thing. And it's a minor miracle they lasted that long. I mean, nobody went to the movies for over a year. I don't know how they were supposed to survive. Those casinos in Vegas, holy cow, they must make a killing. They could lose a couple $2 billion or whatever they lost this year and still not get knocked out. That's amazing. So that's super depressing to hear that.
One thing that I worry about and have been worrying about is, we're just so atomized, like, and it's hard. It's so hard because you can get everything from the comfort of your own home, right? You can buy movies from home. You can order food to come to your home. Like you can order groceries to come to your home. You can work from home. And while it's comforting, and trust me, I enjoy some elements of that. Like there are fewer and fewer places for people to go and enjoy one another's company. Like you used to go to the movies with your friends or with a partner or a date. It's all just really sad. I don't know. It's really depressing. And And then malls are shutting down for obvious reasons, and they're getting taken over by Amazon, which just turns them into fulfillment centers and warehouses. Like malls were gathering places for people as well. So it's sad to see things devolve further, and it's just heartbreaking. I was really looking forward to going back to the movies as well, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen at ArcLight or Pacific Theaters.
Yeah, no, that's a tough blow. And Anna, last thing here is that point you made about gathering places is a really great point. And the more we lose gathering places in the real world, the more isolated we become at home, and the more we dive into some positive internet communities and some negative internet communities.
Mostly negative.
Yeah. And so it's not a harbinger of good things to come when we lose those proverbial town squares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that was a cheery show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Just when we thought we were going to do a fun porn story, we wind up back into onanism, and then you tell us all the movie theaters are closed, and next thing you know, we end on a depressing note again. Anyway, look, we love you guys. At least we got a positive community here. And look, unlike the movie theaters, you guys carried us through 2020, and bless your hearts, we love you for it. So, all right, back to the good fight tomorrow. Much love. See you then.